Okay, good morning. It is the June 29th meeting of the Colorado Oil and Gas Commission. We have a good agenda before us today. We will start with roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Bogue, Commissioner Gonzalez,
Here.
Commissioner McGowan,
Here.
Commissioner Mesner,
Here.
Commissioner Robbins.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 4 out of 7 commissioners present.
Very good. That is a quorum. Good morning to everybody. We look forward to our agenda today. The first item on the agenda is commissioner comments. Does any commissioner have comments for the good of the cause? All right. Seeing none, our next item is general public comment. We asked folks to sign up ahead of time, and 2 individuals did sign up. Kate Christensen signed up for 3 Colorado, and Catherine Merlin signed up, who represents Wild Earth Guardians. Is Miss Christensen with us, Miss Larson?
She is, and we're bringing her in right now.
Hi, how's it going?
Good morning, Mr. Christensen. Nice to see your smiling face. I'm not running a timer. We like to keep things within a reasonable period of time, but you have the floor. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks so much. Good morning. My name's Kate Christensen. I'm a mom of 2. I've lived in Colorado for over 20 years. I live on the very eastern edge of Boulder County and surrounded by oil and gas wells. They are in the open space in the middle of neighborhoods. They're there when I walk my kids to school or go for a jog or a bike ride. For many of these years, I've worked as a pediatric bilingual speech language pathologist, but recently changed careers to be the oil and gas campaign director for 350 Colorado. Thanks for taking the time to hear my comments. I want to comment on the recent Kpk Compliance Hearing that ended Monday. Staff did a great job. They were masterful back in November 2021, too. At that time, they requested the commission, as I'm sure you all remember, I'm just going to do a little recap, to fine Kpk $3.7 million. And instead, the commission went with $800,000 in the CPA. On June 9th, the staff and director came back again, more data, more photos, more evidence that Kpk failed to substantially comply with Section 4 of the CPA. This surprised nobody. Kpk has a long history of treating our state with zero respect. They don't clean up after themselves. We know this. The evidence and patterns are clear. I don't always agree with staff and the director in their decisions, but when they asked that the commission impose the remaining outstanding portions of the penalty, terminate the CPA, suspend Kpk certificate of clearance, refuse to issue new OGDPs, I thought, yeah, that makes good sense. During the hearing, AAG Stafford made the point that Kpk only finished 2 of their 58 projects. John Axelson gave a great, detailed, fact-based testimony that laid out all the failures of Kpk. From the outside perspective and the hours that I was watching, Kpk's response was that they hired a consultant and have weekly meetings. It took them 4 hours to say it, but that was the gist. They also said it's really expensive and time consuming and tried to downplay AAG Stafford's point that oil and gas prices are through the roof right now. So Kpk is obviously raking in the dough, much more so than when the CPA was first negotiated. So instead of following staff's recommendation, commission decided to give it more time, see if Kpk changes their ways. Maybe some weekly meetings. Maybe Chair Robbins will be able to do the be nice thing that happened when public comment got a little too rowdy. But the thing is, staff doesn't need that. They know how to work with oil and gas operators. They work with hundreds of oil and gas operators. They're just trying to do their job. They're trying to protect public health, safety, and the environment. And I know Chair Robbins said, Kpk doesn't get in line. He's ready to throw the book at him. Guess what? No one believes it. As Commissioner Messer pointed out, staff keeps telling you the same thing over and over again. We know Kpk isn't going to comply. Staff has been trying to work with them for years. There are many reasons for the commission to kind of have some blinders on when it comes to the reality that staff is trying to bring to light. Maybe there's some embarrassment about the failure of the CPA. That's okay. Everyone has trusted too much and hoped too much. We all get it. But when you make that mistake and are too trusting, own it and change course. Don't keep pretending Kpk is going to change when your own staff has presented so much evidence to the contrary. Maybe the commission is terrified of KPK's 1,200 stripper wells. I think that's a fair fear. You heard over and over again during financial assurances rulemaking that these problems, like finding oil and gas operators what they deserve to be fined, if they're not financially solvent enough to take it and go bankrupt, that just exposes a problem that is already there. It's not creating a new problem. Better to have the orphan wells too now while you have the taxpayer bailout from the infrastructure bill. As much as it totally irks me that taxpayers are bailing out oil and gas companies to close orphan wells while oil and gas companies are making hundreds of billions of dollars in profits, I say take the federal money and kick KPK out. They are not going to clean up their mess ever. Do it now. Don't let them have months which they can just like take the profits from these truly high oil and gas prices. They don't deserve it. Not only did Chair Robbins issue the empty threat of throwing the book at KPK, but Commissioner Gonzalez said, if you can't afford to pay the fines, then live within the rules. Except that he's not making them pay the fines requested by staff and never will because he's out soon. Thank you for your service, Commissioner Gonzalez, but you're never going to be able to vote to make them pay their fines. So much tough talk and zero action to back it up. I'm sure once the next check-in rolls in, there'll be another reason to continue business as usual because that's all we see. And it tells the other operators that they can treat the COGCC staff however they want. They can treat our state like their own personal dumping toxic waste ground as long as they whine sufficiently about paperwork and cost and how they wish they could do better. They can have one of the worst, most disgusting records and will never be held accountable for the actions by this commission because I don't know why, for sure. When your own staff asks you to hold an operator accountable to fine the millions, revoke their operating licenses, they just get some extra meetings, some more paperwork, and like deferred fines. And maybe someone should investigate to find out why the commission's making the decisions that it is. Thank you for your time. Sorry. Got really worked up the past week.
Thank you, Kate.
Together, Kate.
Thank you, Kate. We appreciate your comments. I truly do. And I appreciate the fact that they reflect a lot of time, effort, and commitment to listening to the difficult issues that come before us. So keep at it, and we appreciate it. I'm not going to comment on where we landed on KPK because that's kind of an ongoing thing. But you did hear all of us as we debated the right course for the state. And I think that I know that I and my fellow commissioners are very much invested in trying to land at the right course on all these difficult issues that come before us. And your participation helps us with that. So I do appreciate that.
Thanks.
All right, now we get to hear from the other Kate, if we could bring her to the fore. Good morning.
Morning. Long time no see. Good morning, commissioners. Thank you for accepting comments today. My name is Kate Merlin. I work for Wild Earth Guardians as their Climate and Energy Programs attorney for Colorado. I would like to start by saying goodbye and thank you to Bill Gonzalez. Bill, I always found you to be a very fair and reasonable guy. Although we don't see eye to eye on everything, I've enjoyed speaking with you from time to time in your work with the commission. So thank you. Then there were a couple matters that I wanted to address. First, Guardians would like to express disappointment with the delay of the implementation of the financial assurance rules. Having watched portions of the June 15th hearing, I understand that there was a medical issue that arose with a staff member, and we wish them a full and speedy return to health. With that said, we believe that there's no excuse for a forms-based agency such as the COGCC have such a complete dependence on a single staff member with the necessary skills and experience to handle the task of drafting a form. It's unfair to that employee. It's a bottleneck that exposes the agency to the risk of something happening to that employee. And ultimately, it ends up being a threat to the public that we may end up with more orphan wells or less financial assurances collected because of this delay. The COGCC system is indispensable to your operations, and we strongly encourage your staff as well as the commission itself to increase their familiarity with the use and operations of the system. So thank you for receiving comments on that. Second, Guardians would like to express disappointment with the outcome of the KPK enforcement proceedings that concluded this week. It's disheartening that even with the burden of proof placed on KPK to show substantial compliance with the settlement agreement, and despite the overwhelming testimony from staff regarding the lack of progress, new compliance issues arising that are creating a deepening hole of KPK problems, and KPK's problematic culture that appears to spend more money fighting enforcement than in compliance, this commission again chose forbearance and to extend additional time and resources to this operator. We agree with staff. It's shameful that the commission disregarded the staff's findings, given their knowledge of and experience in dealing with this operator and this specific compliance agreement. The price of oil is sky high. If KPK can't operate within the rules in this environment, then there's no universe in which they could. And we are just wondering how many more leaks and spills and unremediated ongoing issues is this commission going to accept responsibility for? Kate Christensen did a great job of expressing the confusion and dismay that I'm feeling. So I'll leave my comments there. Thank you, Commission, for taking comments, and thank you to the staff for their ongoing work and diligence in trying to hold KPK to their obligations. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your comments and your, again, as with Kate Christensen, sort of dedication to listening and reviewing and providing perspective to us as we try to tackle the jobs that are before us. With regard to the first comment about the fact that we find the commission in a place in which there is sort of singular reliance on one employee to undertake one task, that is something that is definitely on the radar screen of the leadership at COGCC, and they are working to tackle that issue. I think everyone realizes that that issue needs to be addressed, especially in the day and age that we're in now, where all the things that we're doing are in like mind, very, very transparent. And so it just makes sense. And so I just want to let you know that that is an issue that has been identified, that's being worked on. We did need to pivot on the deadline on financial assurance, because the last thing we needed was everybody filing disparate forms or disparate attempts at compliance. That would have made I think a tough job like tremendously tougher. And so we pivoted as best we could, but we are addressing the issue that you have intelligently raised for us. And I just want you to know that we appreciate the comments and want you to know that that is on our agenda. As to the KPK, I don't want to speak to that, and that it's still a pending matter before us, but we appreciate the comments that you and Ms. Christensen brought before us today. So thank you for being in attendance and monitoring our whereabouts. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. With that, I'll give a little heads up on our agenda. We have a presentation to begin with, and then we've got several two OGDPs, maybe three, and then we've got some enforcement hearings. The enforcement hearings will take place in the afternoon. Our enforcement staff is in a retreat this morning, so if we get through the other matters, we'll break until 1, and then tomorrow we will reconvene on the orphan well mitigation fee enterprise rulemaking. So with that, we would elevate Ms. Thomas from Crusoe Energy for a presentation on innovations in the oil and gas industry.
Good morning, commissioners. Can everyone see me and hear me?
We can. Good to see you, Mr. Cavanis. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to present and for all the work you've been doing. So my name is Kavnis. I'm born and raised here in Denver, Colorado, and I'm the president and co-founder of Crusoe Energy Systems, which is also based here in Denver. And I've been asked to just give a presentation about our technology and what we do in and around reduction of flared natural gas across the oil industry. So I'm going to try to present my screen here, and just bear with me for 1 second as I do that. Okay, hopefully everybody can see this.
We can.
Okay, I'll try to go to a full page. Okay, you can still see this?
We can. I don't know that it went to full screen, but we can see it pretty good. So I think you're good.
Okay, well, we'll do our best. All right, so Crusoe, the mission of our company is to align the future of computing with the future of climate. And the way that we address that specific challenge is by reducing the waste and flaring of natural gas, and specifically the emission of methane that comes from incomplete combustion from flares of natural gas. And just some kind of context on the problem at hand. So globally, there's more than 10 billion cubic feet of natural gas flared daily. It's more than 5 trillion cubic feet per year. It's enough gas that if it was captured, it would power the entire continent of Africa. It would power the entire Bitcoin mining network 8 times over. It would power a large proportion of like data centers and IT equipment around the entire world. It's a very large amount of otherwise wasted natural resource and energy. And more importantly, from a climate perspective, many studies have shown that flares do not fully combust methane, and a significant portion of the methane tends to escape uncombusted to the atmosphere. Methane is more than 80 times as potent as CO2 as a greenhouse gas. And in addition to that, there also is a lot of otherwise wasted electricity generated throughout our country. We have more recently had some solutions that can try to tap into some of that, especially periods of time at night where it's very windy. There's sort of excess wind generation. But our primary focus historically has been on flared natural gas. And the solution that we offer, we call digital flare mitigation. Some quick background on the company. So we were formed in 2018. My personal story is I grew up here in Denver, Colorado. My dad and grandfather were both in the oil and gas business here in Colorado. And I initially thought I would try to follow in their footsteps, but I went to Middlebury College in Vermont, which is actually where 350.org, Kate Christensen's organization, I think, was formed. A professor there named Bill McKibben was really at the center of the climate debate and movement, and I was very impacted by that climate conversation and ended up starting my career in renewable energy. Ended up going through business school, and I studied geology undergrad, went to business school, came back to Denver as an investment banker for the energy industry, and found my way back into the oil and gas industry later in my career. And I was working with a company that had drilled wells that were outside of the area where natural gas infrastructure was operating. So the wells were oil wells. The oil was being trucked to the Suncor refinery here in Denver, which is where most of the DJ Basin oil does end up. And the gas was being flared. And to me, that was just a really crazy problem. It's obviously an economic problem. It's a big waste of an otherwise valuable resource, but it's also a really big environmental problem, and there should be something better to do than just light the gas on fire. And so I've been interested in Bitcoin mining since early on, and mining it as sort of a hobbyist at a smaller scale, and had a friend from high school. We both grew up here in Denver, who had gone very deep, sort of down the rabbit hole of artificial intelligence and large scale computing that's very energy intensive. And we realized that there's Bitcoin mining, there's AI, there's rendering, there are all these fast growing computing demands for power, and there's this huge wasted source of energy over here on the other side. Maybe one problem can solve the other. If we could find a way to package data centers, ruggedize them for the oil field, and bring them actually out to the pad site where we could capture the otherwise flared natural gas, generate power and power a modular data center on site in the oil field. And that would actually be a much better way to handle that stranded gas, because we can fully combust the gas through a generator. We can beneficially use the power rather than wasting it. And we can, power this growing computing demand with an otherwise wasted energy resource. So basically pulling that load off the grid and using a wasted resource instead. So what we call that digital flare mitigation. And the main benefits here, and I'll show you some more images of what this looks like in practice and some case studies, but it solves the critical environmental and regulatory challenges of stranded natural gas. Basically natural gas that's a byproduct of oil, produced in areas that don't have sufficient or any gas pipeline takeaway capability. So it's the most cost effective, it's modular, it's highly scalable, and it's very reliable. So operationally, we've developed this over the last 5 years to be something that really does work at the scale of the modern oil industry to solve the scale of flares associated with shale development. This is what it looks like, kind of breaking it into its components. So typically there's a stranded, well that's flaring its natural gas. We will tie into that gas line that's actually going to the flare and sort of intercept that gas and bring it over to a generator.
Mr. Cadmus, are you trying to forward your presentation?
Yes.
Does anyone else? I see the same slide. Does anyone else?
Okay.
Yes, I do too. So,
Let's see here. Has this updated now at all?
okay,
Yes.
now you're on the slide, patented digital flare mitigation system.
Got it. Okay. Well, you didn't miss too much. And hopefully I'll just leave it here, and hopefully you can see it going forward. Let me know if the slides don't update when it sounds like I've moved forward. I'll let you know when I do. In terms of how this looks, there's a weld that's flaring its natural gas. We'll intercept that gas by tapping into that pipeline upstream of the flare. That gas will go to a generator. And this generator, very importantly, we've designed around a super high combustion efficiency of the methane. So the Environmental Defense Fund did a very comprehensive study of flaring. They found that about 7% of the methane is typically escaping uncombusted from flares. These generators that we deploy achieve 99.89% combustion of the methane. So we essentially eliminate all the methane slippage, and then use that power in modular data centers, which we connect either by satellite, or we've developed some really creative wireless microwave-based solutions. And in some cases, we can bring fiber. And we've actually invested pretty heavily into bringing fiber to rural communities that wouldn't otherwise have that fiber, which is sort of a nice benefit along the side of our operations. The structuring of these systems commercially is more or less, we modified a gas purchase agreement to work for our purposes, so that there is an amount paid per MCF, priced in dollars per MCF. It's typically not going to be competitive with natural gas pipeline pricing, meaning if the operator could access a pipeline, it would be economically better off to do so. And we're never really in a position of where our gas purchase price is driving the economics of the well or incentivizing new wells to be drilled. It's much more simply a mechanism for an arm's length transaction and pricing on the gas that can be used to pay royalties and severance taxes to the state. And it's a number that's greater than zero, meaning that relative to flaring, it's certainly incrementally better. And we typically do not charge capital cost or operating cost to the operator. So we take all the risk of building the capital and operating, and we, in exchange for that, we generally get gas that's attractively priced from our perspective. The operator gets a free solution for one of their biggest climate and ESG problems that is a very low barrier to saying yes to. They can simply solve that for free, make some incremental revenue, and it's generally been viewed as a really good win-win commercial structure. And the royalty owners and the state, get their percentage of that gas purchase price, just like a typical gas purchase agreement would work. So the process for deploying one of these systems is pretty fast now. We've really got it down to a science. We've actually deployed more than 100 of these data centers throughout the United States. We have a team of 270 people here at Crusoe. I'm very proud to say that the majority of that staff is here in Denver. We have a manufacturing facility in Arvada where we have about 70 people, mostly highly skilled tradespeople, and we have a headquarters downtown Denver. And so, we're really proud to be a big Colorado employer. We also have an office in San Francisco. It's our software engineering office, and we have a Williston office for the Bakken region. And then we have a facility in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where we handle more computer repairs and upgrades. So in terms of the integration process with that team, what we're able to do is within about a week, we can have the equipment on site, hooked up and operating. When we turn on the generator, you'll see the flare shrink. And right there, that's a reduction of emissions and wasted energy. And typically what we can work with is a very wide range of gas compositions. We do it in about 300 MCF per day block sizes. That's one generator and 2 data centers for us. We can work with gas ranging from 900 BTU to 2,500 BTU. So anything you're going to see in the Colorado oily basins is going to be within that range. Doesn't have to be super high pressure. We can even compress if needed. So, minimum pressure, something like 30 to 50 PSI and up. And then our only real requirement is just no H2S, no sour gas. There are systems to treat H2S if it's present. It's typically not an issue we see here in Colorado. Sometimes we see that more in the Permian or the Bakken. In terms of a footprint, it's designed so that it can, basically exist on the pad site that is present after, the completion operations, and we can comply with all the required setbacks. So we'll typically find a corner of the pad that the operator wants us to set up on, and we'll do a modular approach. So one generator in black, 2 data centers in red, and a transformer in green. And there are different kind of configurations of that, just to, we can do an L shape or whatever mechanism allows us to live within the existing pad space. So no additional surface disturbance required. In many cases, operators are even reclaiming and reducing the surface area even as we're deploying. So this is, the most important piece to me is the emission side of this. Methane is getting more attention globally, especially after the Glasgow Conference of Parties meetings really highlighted that as one of the key objectives, is to reduce methane emissions from industry. But methane emissions, it's 82.5 times as potent as CO2 as a greenhouse gas, and a lot of it escapes from flares. So what we do is there's a negative component, which is the elimination of methane. And that's the full combustion that I mentioned earlier. There's the positive component, which is the emission of CO2. We net those things out, and we can demonstrate, and we do stack testing to really show this with real measured data, which is reported through state or EPA depending on the jurisdiction. It's all third-party tested. So that's a 63% reduction in CO2 equivalent compared to continued flaring. And so every time we can deploy one of our systems and reduce otherwise flared natural gas, we're achieving that methane destruction and CO2 equivalent reduction. The digital pipeline is what we refer to as our network, and that's a combination of satellite-based systems, microwave-based systems, and fiber systems. We have a whole team of network engineers here that have built out a really creative system that allows us to have excellent connectivity, even in the most rural parts of North Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, and we do operate some in Colorado. Although flaring is, the commission gets a lot of credit for having put in place rules that have minimized flaring. There are still pockets of stranded gas within the state, and we've tried to be helpful in those areas. Most of our activities in places like the Bakken, where historically they've flared up to 20% of their gas, it's better now. The Permian, again, has historically been one of the larger percentage flaring areas. It's getting better, but with oil prices going up, there's more drilling activity. We anticipate pipelines filling up and probably flaring volumes rising as a result of that. So just to end with some quick kind of case studies or examples of where this can be useful. Often there's going to be a situation where a geologist or a landman needs to drill a well to either hold a lease based on their lease obligations, or to appraise the geology of an area that hasn't been tested before. And that's usually an area where there isn't pipeline access because it hasn't been tested or produced before, so there's no reason to have a pipeline out there. Historically, that would be a situation where the well would be drilled, there'd be a production test, there's nowhere to go with the gas, so it gets flared. In many cases, in other states especially, that can be permitted as a longer term flare, depending on the situation. So that's a great place where we can come in and go ahead and test that horizon, hold your lease obligation, but let's not flare the gas. If we're gonna produce here, let's minimize the flaring, and we can deploy the data centers there to do that. There can be right-of-way issues that prevent pipeline from being built. There can also just be simply economic, distance of pipe compared to the volumes available that will mean that a pipe will never be built. It will just simply will not be economic to build that pipeline. So this is particularly common in the Bakken, up in North Dakota and Montana, where there are pockets that just may be stranded for very long periods of time. And again, we can deploy up to millions of cubic feet per day of capacity. We have done that. We operate more than 10 million cubic feet per day of capacity across our company, and we're adding to that quickly. So we can do those longer term deployments as well. Lack of midstream access or capacity. There are some parts of Colorado that have this issue where there simply isn't a pipeline that serves that oily area. And historically, it's been an area where gas has been flared. And we're really proud to say we've been able to come in and help those operators reduce their flaring, comply with the requirements and the regulations of the COGCC, and do it in a way that's economic, and there's not an economic objection like you're going to hear about from even some of the previous public comments, where often an operator will raise that kind of economic objection. This is a mechanism that sort of solves all that. It's just it's a cost-free mechanism to reduce flaring. The exploration wells and acreage delineation, we talked about that a bit. This is an image of the Badlands in North Dakota. You can see it be a really hard area to build pipelines through. There's all kinds of hydraulic constraints with the ups and downs. And there's a lot of acres that there's still exploration activity going on. So here's an image of 3 of our data centers that are deployed on that pad, or 3 generators and 6 data centers. Just key points to summarize, and I'm happy to answer any questions after this. Digital flare mitigation is a system for reducing flaring, enabling regulatory compliance, and a bona fide beneficial use of otherwise wasted natural gas. Very important emissions reductions, not just CO2 equivalent, but we spec the best possible catalysts for our generators, meaning we get almost 100% reduction of NOx, SOx, and VOCs, which are your smog precursors. So especially, we're all familiar with that in the Front Range, when you can get that sort of brown haze. That's typically going to be your VOCs and NOx and carbon monoxide mixing. So we have a mechanism for reducing that, as well as the important greenhouse gases. Opportunity to earn gas revenue for stranded wells. Again, it's not going to be priced competitive with pipelines, certainly not in today's environment, but it is better than zero. For us, importantly, we try to price it in a way that it's not the incentive to drill a new well. It's more of the mechanism for third-party pricing for royalties and severance taxes. Obviously, that well's otherwise producing and flaring, and the gas has no value in the base case. It's modular, easily mobilized, and scalable. So 300 MCF per day is the minimum increment, and then we can go up to millions of cubic feet per day, just based on how many wells and what those volumes look like. And it really is quite flexible. And we have the ability to demobilize also. As the production curve comes down, we can subtract capacity, move that elsewhere. With more than 100 data centers operating, we have that kind of portfolio effect, which is helpful. Implementations are fast, in sort of days or weeks, and we've got a supply chain that's constantly working. We have our own manufacturing facility, so we typically can have that inventory closer at hand to be able to meet the needs of wells that are coming online, and that can avoid delays and frankly just more flaring. And then the deal structures, we can be creative. We've got a great business development team that tries to work with operators to, if there's some unique circumstances that we need to work around, we can try to do that. So hopefully didn't take up too much of your time. I do appreciate the opportunity to present this, and hopefully it's sort of informative and helpful on your end. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. A lot of good information in a short period of time. We do appreciate that. Commissioners, does anyone have questions? Commissioner McGowan and Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you so much for coming to present today, because I think on some of our visits and just based on some information that I've been reading lately, I've had a lot of questions about how this fits into our regulatory scheme or doesn't fit into our regulatory scheme. And so I have a bunch of questions, and I'm so excited that you're here. So I'm going to start off with the generators that you're using. And I appreciate that you're showing the reduction that from what might happen with flaring. I'm wondering what emissions can you quantify the emissions from these generators though, because they are quite large. And while you're reducing emissions from one source, everything emits. So I'm wondering what the emissions portfolio from these generators looks like.
Yes.
And then related to that, I'm wondering, are you permitted then by CDPHE to run these generators?
Yes, of course. Yeah, we go through the full permitting process, and we do submit an emissions and a testing regime along with that. So a stack testing regime. I don't know the emissions off the top of my head, but the 300,000 cubic feet per day generator is our standard, and that's sort of what we've permitted in every state where we've operated. We've gone through the state mechanism, or if it's on federal lands, then through the EPA's permitting mechanism.
Thank you. And I'm wondering if you all have done any sort of noise testing or been, I mean, some of these locations are remote where probably maybe the noise from the generator and the fan isn't a big deal, but I know that it's constantly going because that equipment needs to be kept
Sure.
at a certain temperature. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the noise component.
Sure. Yeah, so the buildings are sound attenuated, and they do have a silencer on the exhaust. And then we've really never deployed, in my recollection, in an area that would be, within even like line of sight to houses. Most of the places where we operate are really rural parts of like Montana or North Dakota. So it's not your like front range activity. We're not operating the DJ Basin or anything where you'd be kind of close to neighborhoods. So it hasn't been an issue historically for us, but I do know that we've looked at being below that 80 decibel number, which I'm not sure if that's the number in Colorado. It is the number in some other states, and that's before you're beyond, I think, like a 50-foot setback from our equipment or something like that. But I could confirm that if you wanted to know with more specifics.
Okay, thanks. And these are just kind of things that I'm curious about. So as you're using product that might have otherwise been flared, is the operator paying royalties on that? I assume you're not paying the royalties. The operator then is paying mineral owners their royalties because that's product then that's being used.
Yes, the operator pays royalties just as if they'd sold that gas to a pipeline. And that's why we tried to structure it commercially in a way that would look just like another kind of gas sales agreement. In some states, we are required to withhold and pay the severance tax, but I don't think that's the case in Colorado. I think the operator pays in Colorado.
And then this is a little bit of a rabbit hole, so I apologize, but we just went through a hearing when there was a correspondence from Adams County, and they were surprised to see an operator had a relationship with Crusoe and was using their equipment, and the county was unaware that it had been placed and was being used. And so I'm curious to know how you work with local governments on the placement of your equipment and whether or not each of these is similar to an oil and gas location in that you're paying property taxes. Is it a small business in these locations? How does that all work?
Yeah, We're not operating anything in Adams County at the moment. So maybe there was a miscommunication there. There are some sort of copycat, systems that are out there, not really anything operating at our scale, but folks that have emulated our business model. So it could be that. There may have been, earlier on in our history, a small temporary deployment up by the state line. Might be what's being referenced there, but nothing operating currently or even in the last few years. But when where we do operate in Colorado, it's been more up in like the North Park area. And there we brought the county commissioners out for tours. We brought the COGCC out for a tour. We brought staffers from Senator Hickenlooper and Bennett's offices out for tours. We, early on when we were starting Crusoe here in Denver, before we had any operations, it was just sort of an idea and we were in a garage trying to figure it out. One of my first calls was to the CDPHE and the COGCC just to say, I'm thinking of trying to start this as an entrepreneur and wanted to get your feedback and present that to you. So we've tried to be communicative there. And then we do go through that permitting process, just, like any other generator would or compressor station would go through it. And then, yes, we do pay all the property taxes and sales and use taxes. I can't remember exactly what it looks like in Colorado. Every state has sort of a different tax system on the equipment that gets deployed, but we have a pretty big accounting and finance team that tracks all that and pays those.
Thank you. And I have a couple more and then I'm done. I'm wondering if there are any safety issues related to these engines and these sites. Do you guys have to fill out like a safety plan similar to like we require operators to have an emergency plan in place in case something happens, and fire departments and local governments are aware that that location is there and what's on that location? I'm just curious to know if you do something similar.
Yes, safety is huge for us. We have safety plans for our facilities. There's job safety meetings before every day of work. We've had more than 300,000 man hours worked without a recordable injury across the company. So I think would be considered one of the best safety records in the entire industry in Colorado or anywhere. That's just a really good number, and that's kind of built into our training and our culture. One of our core values is think like a mountaineer. And one of the principles of that is having backup plans if something goes wrong, being a master of your tools, and safety first, second, and third. And specifically your question around emergency plans, every site has a set of documents that sort of lists the nearest hospital, emergency contacts, all that kind of stuff in case something goes wrong. I believe our team's been in touch with the local fire and police departments. We typically do that. Again, we don't have a lot operating in Colorado, but I could reach out and make sure that those conversations have happened.
Thank you. And my last question, and this might more involve AAG Davenport. In the one instance where I visited an operator and they were using, I think it was Crusoe engines and the generators, I had asked how our regulatory regime fits in, and he pointed out, well, they're not on our footprint, so you don't regulate it at all. Do you mostly build outside of the footprint that COGCC regulates? So we say we approve kind of where everything is located on the pad or the footprint of the operations. Do you typically try to build within that footprint or next door, or how far away? And how does that work? And I guess my question for AAG Davenport would be, if it is within the footprint, then does an OGDP have to be amended if that happens?
I can answer the one question, which is typically we're building, well, often we're building on the pad site. There are some cases where we're off the pad site with our own different surface use, and that would be something we call a central delivery point. If there are a number of wells, it's sometimes more efficient to bring that gas to one point rather than build on all the different pad sites. So that might be what you're referring to. I don't know that specific site that you visited. And then in terms of the way that we work through the COGCC, I am going to have to ask our permitting team exactly how they go through that, but I believe we go through it. Well, I'll have to ask them actually. I don't want to say something that's not correct.
Thank you. I really appreciated your presentation because I've had a lot of questions. So
Sure.
really appreciate being here.
Great, excellent questions, Commissioner McGowan. Commissioner Gonzalez.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Cabinets, for being here. I really appreciate the insight into what Caruso's doing here in Colorado and in other states, just kind of the technology in general. The site I think Commissioner McGowan was referring to was outside of D90 Gondola's North Park site, where we were there on one of their big pad locations, and your facility seemed to be kind of across the highway there. And I imagine it's because, you have one operator, you have a field that's operated, almost exclusively by that operator, and they kind of bring in all their gas together to manage it. And so I think that's what Commissioner McGowan was talking about, because I was out there.
Sounds right.
Yeah. Saw that same facility out there. So Commissioner McGowan asked a lot of the questions I had on the permitting process, so I'll skip over those. I'm curious about how often you guys are on site. It seems to me like it's a pretty automated facility, but I'm curious, how often are you sending someone out there to either check on the equipment, to make sure that that everything's secure from the generator being maintained to the gas lines coming in, making sure that they have proper integrity. So I'm curious about what that looks like.
Yep. So we have a daily check, routine schedule of daily on-site checks at all of our locations. We also have a bunch of pretty smart systems in terms of cameras that will feed alerts if anything looks off inside the generator building or outside the generator building or in the data center, and they're sort of set up to detect an alert on if anything looks off. We have something called a fire eye system. So if it sees a flash or a fire, it can trigger an emergency shutdown and obviously send out all the correct alerts to get people out there right away. We've never, fortunately have not ever had a fire or an explosion from our equipment, but that's in place. And then we have explosive gas detection sensors called LEL monitors installed in our equipment, so that if there was gas leaking, we could detect that. And again, it would trigger an automatic shutdown and all the automated alerts to our operators to go out and fix whatever might have been happening. And so, yeah, a lot of smart systems. We're very software forward, tech oriented kind of company. Got about 25 software engineers in San Francisco that have tried to put in place as much of that intelligence and safety systems as we can. And then we do have the routine checks by our people on the ground. So we have mechanics, electricians, and data center technicians. And typically multiple people from those different teams are visiting each site each day. And there's just a maintenance component to that. We want to, maybe a computer has a couple of boards that are down and we want to do some hardware swaps. We'll obviously have to check oil levels and everything, make sure the generators get their once over every day. And then the electricians have a regular maintenance program where they're, looking at connections and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, yeah, thank you. That answers my question. And I was curious, we working in oil and gas, the pumpers are having daily routes, and it sounds like you guys have a similar setup to busy your facility, which I think is important.
Yes.
So the next question I had is, well, I'll kind of preface it, that we've talked to a number of operators, some large, some small, who are struggling with their gas takeaway. Now, whether that be that they had exploration wells or proving up a concept and couldn't quite scope out that gas line, or the economics didn't work out well, or we have operators that have been attached to a vintage gas line or a historic gas line that's then been shut down by the operator. And in a number of cases, they've told us that that essentially data centers on site, or the use of their gas for data centers and for data computing, is not viable because of this minimum gas threshold. And you mentioned that in your presentation today, this 300 MCF, which we've heard that number before. And I'm curious, do you anticipate that threshold changing or being lowered that may allow more access by lower producing operators? I understand there's probably, some physics involved with it as it currently stands, but I'm curious, what that limitation, why that limitation exists, and how the future looks in terms of, that limitation being applied.
Yeah, that's a fair question. when we started off, we started at smaller scales. It is technically possible, and we've done it down to like 80 MCF per day. It's more of a question of, as a business, we had to pick a couple of standard designs where we thought, that's where we can really build a business. And for us commercially, that made sense to go for these blocks of 300 MCF per day or 2.5 million cubic feet per day. That's also where we can make the biggest dent in the flaring problem. Now, those kinds of flares are mostly outside of the state of Colorado, right? We have a sub 1% flaring number here in Colorado, and you're not going to see somebody just, popping off a 10 million cubic foot per day huge flare for years at a time, like you do see in other states and especially in other countries. We've just been to the Middle East and Argentina, and there's some insane sized flares in these other places. And we just had to standardize around that form factor that made the most sense to build a business. Now, like I mentioned, there are some other groups that may be operating at a smaller scale that they might gravitate to those opportunities. And if there was enough of if there were enough of those kind of smaller scale opportunities, then maybe we could revisit that. So if there's a group of operators that you're familiar with and they all share that problem, like in one area, maybe we should revisit that and see if we can't make a kind of combined proposal, or again, maybe there's a aggregation approach where we could bring it all to one site and put in place one of those bigger systems that would use our existing form factor.
No, and that makes a ton of sense, Mr. Cabinet. I kind of understand when you're building the business, you want to build it for, a specific target application to take advantage of, your economies of scale with your equipment and whatnot. So I can fully appreciate that. And hopefully the operators are thinking about this creatively as well to see if this is an opportunity for them to leverage in addition to Caruso. So thank you again for being here. I really appreciate it.
Commissioner Messner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Cabinet, for being here. I think this is interesting. I've gotten a ton of questions about it. And so it's good to have you here present your company and some of the operations that you're doing. And I appreciate that. So I'm going to ask you some questions that I get about this, just so I better understand kind of your operations and what's happening on the ground. While I think you indicated at the beginning that there were other potential uses of that computing, I think what I'm hearing you say is that the primary utilization of it is Bitcoin mining. Is that right?
Yeah, where we started was Bitcoin mining. So it has a few benefits. It's very energy intensive, and as a startup, we didn't have to go find a customer for computing. You can just sort of plug in, and it's an automatic way to convert the energy into some value. And the networking requirements, sort of on a technical level, were sort of the easiest on-ramp was Bitcoin mining. Since then, over the last 2 years, we've been building something called Crusoe Cloud, which is a GPU-based series of data centers, which we do now have deployed and operating on flare gas. And so when somebody thinks about, okay, I'm doing my cloud computing, and you think of Amazon Web Services or Google Cloud or those types of offerings, what we're offering is a cloud powered by otherwise flared natural gas that has the benefit of you run your computing load here, you reduce methane emissions and energy waste, and we can offer a lower, better price point than those other incumbent cloud computing systems, significantly in a lot of cases. And so now it's really cool. We've got paying customers that are doing those computing loads at scale in data centers. Right now, they're mostly deployed in Montana. And it's rendering, it's artificial intelligence model training. MIT's particle physics lab is running research powered by flared natural gas. COVID therapy research is happening powered by flared natural gas. They were protein folding simulations and graphics to try to understand if a therapy could bond with the COVID spike protein. So some really cool stuff there. Bitcoin mining is still a huge part of what we do. Longer term, we're trying to build a business that's 50-50 cloud computing, cryptocurrency, validating. And personally, I'm a long-term believer in Bitcoin, and we're going to continue to invest there. But there's a really great, just logical diversification benefit of going into cloud computing. Also, I think from the state's perspective, it's hopefully viewed favorably in that we're bringing like data center jobs and some pretty cool tech-oriented jobs, and even out to the oil field, where folks that have a more industry trade background can now work in and around a data center. We've taken a lot of roustabouts, and now they're data center techs. I'm just really proud of offering that in Colorado. We fabricate our data centers here in Arvada, 270 employees. We're paying about $26 million a year in payroll. Most of that's to Colorado employees.
Great, thank you for that. Now, I'm going to try to understand a little better the kind of operations on the ground. And, I do understand that the way that you've got it structured, you're essentially a sales line for this natural gas in more remote parts of the state. Do your operations run 24/7, 365 without any need to shut down operations for the oil and gas location, or necessitate any requiring of bypassing it into a flare? Yep. While you're doing maintenance operations or whatever? So my question is, are you using 100% of the gas 100% of the time?
No, I understand the question. So we're about 98.5% available for service, meaning as long as the gas is there, we'll be there. Where our biggest source of downtime is actually the gas producer going offline. So their well has a problem, big storm comes in, they shut in, parted rod, pump stops, something like that. That will take us offline because obviously the gas flow stops. So that is by far our largest source of downtime. The other 1.5 to 2% is the routine maintenance, the oil changes, that kind of thing. And it's a relatively smaller percentage of the time. Our goal is 100%, as close as possible to be 100%. Practically speaking, it is impossible to get all the way there. And the recourse there is either the producer would cut back their production. So if we've got 4 units on site, we might take 1 down for maintenance. So maybe they pull back their pump rate 25%, so we can live within the capacity we still have operating. Or in the worst case scenario, if we were like all offline for some reason, which doesn't happen often, but it can happen, then the default would be shut in or go back to flare until we're back online. And that's an operator decision on what they're going to do there.
Okay. Yeah, so that was my other question. So I mean, I guess, what's the timeline, the anticipated timeline of these operations, understanding that you're kind of building for that 300 MCF level, and that we've got decline curves associated with that, and understanding you're able to pull things away and downsize, but anticipated life of some of these operations in North Park, for example, are dozens of years. And there's some consideration that this is the solution for not needing to develop a gas gathering system. And so that may not encourage that system to be developed. But as operations, continue down the decline curve, perhaps below what you're able to utilize that gas for in your operations, that could cause a problem at some point in the future. So I'm just trying to understand the timelines and kind of bigger landscape level business plans.
Yeah, our typical deployments are anywhere from 1 to 3 years. We've done some shorter term things. We prefer to go longer term if possible. And I think North Park's a good example of that, where we can be there for as long as they need us to be there. And back to the question of incentivizing a pipeline. Again, we're not paying a price that's like competitive with natural gas pipeline prices. If there was any economically reasonable way to bring a gas pipeline to North Park, it would have been done a long time ago, or they would do it now because they could make more money with their MCF. We're really there more as that, don't flare, comply with the regs, solve the flaring problem. And if a pipeline is going to arrive, we will plan to demobilize and go elsewhere. But until and unless that happens, I think we'd all rather just not have the gas go to waste, not have the stranded energy problem. So it's been a good solution in the interim. And if the volumes get big enough there, like if they were to really in an area that's stranded, the pipeline economic question is typically a function of volumes being produced. So where there might be a small operation, it's not going to justify a pipeline. If enough wells are drilled or planned, that can attract the pipeline. And that's really the main economic decision that's happening there, is like, what's the long-term production look like here? Does it make sense to gather that with traditional infrastructure or not? The real benefit of ours is that because we don't have to be permanent, the threshold for deploying something can be made, that decision can be made on 1 year, 2 year, 3 years. And that just gives us a lot more flexibility to go and work with operators.
Great. I think my last question is, and I think you indicated this in your presentation, but I mean, you're 100% focused on creating these operations in situations where there is no gas takeaway. So you're not putting these in situations where there is existing gas takeaway. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, we're very focused on otherwise stranded gas. So you're not going to see us in a situation where we're buying gas out of a pipeline that would have gone to market otherwise. And if you think about it from our economic incentives, you'll understand why, which is, that's market priced gas. We've designed all this technology around. The whole reason for building all this is to go, work with the gas that otherwise has lower economic value because there's no market for it. It has to be flared. It's this pain point that we can help to solve.
Great. Thank you for answering my questions and for being here today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great questions from commissioners. Thank you for your presentation. We appreciate it. I'm not seeing further questions, so we will let you go. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you, commissioners.
All right. We will now proceed with our docket. Next up is docket number 210600105. The applicant is the Great Western Operating Company, and it is consideration of the Bro Oil and Gas Development Plan. Let's give Ms. Larson an opportunity to bring to the attorney for the applicant, Ms. Jost.
Good morning. So we are slowly getting folks in, and I know Mr. Maxey from Weld County, I believe, is going to speak as well. And I think he was scheduled before PDC does our presentation.
Great. And just confirming, Ms. Larson, we do not have public comment on this matter. Is that right?
That is correct. No public comment.
Then I believe we will hear in course Jason Maxey, the Director of the Local Government Designee from Weld County Oil and Gas Energy Department, followed by a Great Western presentation, and then commissioners' questions and deliberation. Good morning, Mr. Maxey. Good to see you.
Good morning, Chair Robbins and Commission, and everybody else joining us. Thank you again for a few minutes to talk about the local government position on this application that's in front of you, and to give you just an opportunity to see if there's any questions regarding our process with Weld County. So just a little heads up, if I mention PDC, then my apologies. I mean Great Western. That's what the application was originally submitted under, but there has been a change, and now we've been working with PDC on some things. So in my mind, they're interchangeable. So thank you for any leeway on that ahead of time. Weld County's submitted comments for this location were uploaded by OGLA staff on April 13th, 2022. Those comments are included on the COGCC Form 2A. A pre-application meeting was held by Weld County on September 18th of 2020. And we held an in-depth alternative siting discussion on the Bro FD pad. Attendees included oil and gas energy staff from Weld County, and at the time, Great Western staff. The COGCC was invited, but was not able to be in attendance. and the town of Windsor was also invited but declined to attend. The application was received on January 14th, 2021, and a hearing was scheduled for February 25th, 2021. No public comments were received by Weld County staff. However, we did receive an application for intervention, and that was received from the town of Windsor in response to our referral request that was sent out as part of our application process. The town of Windsor expressed concerns regarding the originally proposed haul route, which utilized internal roadways to the Kodak commercial kind of area, and they utilized lithoplate drive north to Eastman Park. In coordination with the town of Windsor, Great Western then submitted a revised haul route map utilizing Kodak Drive west to Highway 257. On Monday, February 22nd, 2021, the town of Windsor indicated that their concerns had been alleviated with the revised haul route and therefore withdrew their application for intervention at the Weld County 1041 WOGLA hearing. The hearing officer ultimately approved 1041 WOGLA 20-0084 on February 25th, 2021, along with the revised haul route. The final order was recorded with the Weld County Clerk and Recorder on March 4th, 2021, and was subsequently published in the Greeley Tribune on March 6th. This location is within the floodplain, and a floodplain hazard development permit was issued, which is FHDP 21-0004 on February 22nd, 2021, and was subsequently updated on April 16th, 2021. So we do have an active and viable floodplain hazard development permit on record. On June 8th, 2021, the approved 1041 WOGLA was amended due to a minor equipment change, and that is as well on record in our file for the permit. Now, since all this happened in 2021, it has since been brought to the attention of Weld County that PDC now, since they acquired Great Western, in coordination with the town of Windsor and multiple owners within the business park, desire to once again revise the haul route. An amendment hearing has been scheduled before the Weld County hearing officer to amend the previously issued final order in regards to the haul route. We have to do this due to the fact that the final order from the hearing officer specifically mentions the haul route, and it specifically mentions the interactions between the town of Windsor, at the time Great Western, and Weld County staff to revise the haul route to what is currently on file. So due to the fact that it is mentioned specifically in the final order from the hearing officer, we have to hold an amendment hearing to amend that final order and consider the new haul route that is being proposed. That amendment hearing has been scheduled for Thursday, July 14th. So in a few weeks, we will hold that amendment hearing. The public comments received by the COGCC are mainly focused on the haul route and the responsibility for maintenance on the privately maintained roadways within that commercial development. While the haul route itself falls within the town of Windsor's jurisdiction, the Weld County WOGLA process requires designation of and commitment to a designated haul route. While Weld County is open to revising the haul route, we believe it's important to confirm that all the proper parties are at the table for those decisions to be made. It is our belief that the comments received by the COGCC were made by those same owners within the business park who have been involved in recent communications regarding the request to amend the final order. And those parties have also been notified of our scheduled amendment hearing. So just a part of due process, we believe that they needed to be notified of that amendment hearing, and they have been notified of such. A revised or new floodplain permit would be required as part of the haul route changes if there is any additional access roadways that are to be built on any Weld County parcels. And as stated, to sum up here in Director Murphy's comments that we read and we received, as stated in those comments and also included in our submitted comments to the COGCC on the 2A, Weld County does support approval of this permit. So thank you again for the time. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the commission may have.
Thank you, Mr. Maxey. Commissioner Messner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Maxey, as always, for presenting on these OGDPs. I find it really helpful. I did have a question about and I may have asked this question on a previous OGDP, but it came up again in my brain. So floodplain hazard development permit. I mean, this is being utilized in this OGDP as rationale for waiving the ALA. I will note that there was an ALA that was associated with the Weld County process. And I still think that that should be submitted as a substantially equivalent ALA in our process. But I wonder if you could just talk to me a little bit about that floodplain hazard development permit, what's associated with it, and how that would or would not necessitate an ALA, or not necessitate an ALA at this point.
Thank you, Commissioner Messner. If I could maybe ask a clarifying point here, your question about the floodplain hazard development permit and the fact of it necessitating an ALA, are you talking about that from the state standpoint?
Yeah, I'm just curious, you know, in your opinion as a local government, you know, land use professional, you know, what's in that floodplain development permit, floodplain hazard development permit that would negate the need to do an ALA as far as determining appropriate site for an oil and gas location, because that was kind of the rationale utilized for not needing an ALA in our OGDP process. So
yeah, and I again appreciate the question. I think honestly it's a little hard for me to answer that on my end to determine what may or may not necessitate an ALA on the state's rules. I think that your rules have provisions that allow an operator to ask for a waiver of that ALA process. Again, on Weld County side, it doesn't matter where they're at within the county. We have certain stipulations that we consider alternate siting for every location, and we have that discussion starting at that pre-application phase. The floodplain hazard development permit is a requirement, obviously, in situations like this. It details certain factors as far as specific type of fencing, anchoring requirements, flow rates for water and electrical equipment being a certain level above the high water mark, et cetera. So there's multiple things within the floodplain hazard development permit. But I think from my standpoint, since we require a alternate siting analysis for every location, regardless of the circumstances, it's a little hard for me to state, I guess, why it might not be required on your end as from the operator's request. I'm sorry to kind of
I guess I'm not asking questions very well today, so I apologize for that. But my I mean, really it is what are the details associated with the floodplain permit that would, you know, develop whatever BMPs may be necessary so that an ALA wouldn't be necessary. I mean, I've read your ALA analysis, or one that was submitted to you, and it appears to me that your process indicated that through your ALA analysis, that based on the BMPs provided for anchoring and the other pieces within your floodplain hazard development permit, that this was still the preferred location, even if there was a location outside of the floodplain.
That is correct. And as you probably have seen on the final orders, which I know you read, so thank you for that. There are certain stipulations in the final orders, and some of those stipulations refer to other permits. And in this case, the floodplain permit in and of itself has 15 conditions that are specific to this location that the operator needs to do as additional BMPs due to the fact of being located in the floodplain. So those are a part of the conditions that they have to do for additional BMPs. But yes, to your point, through the evaluation of the alternate locations that were proposed within the 1041 WOGLA process, we felt that the operator's agreement to adhere to these additional BMPs in the floodplain permit, along with all the other information in the 1041 process, that we felt that this location made sense. Again, it is in an industrial commercial type of business park. There are multiple other businesses that are located in a similar floodplain situation that may or may not have their own floodplain permits. But for this one in particular, we felt that all the conditions that they agreed to and that are within the final order and the floodplain permit will allow them to operate safely and effectively within this location.
Okay. Thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you.
Further questions from commissioners? All right, I'm not seeing further questions. Mr. Maxey, once again, the commission appreciates your presentation, your speaking to the OGDPs that are before us from the perspective of Weld County. It is a very important perspective, and we appreciate your being with us.
Thank you, Chair Robbins. And if I may say one more thing.
Go ahead.
If I'm reading and remembering correctly here, Commissioner Gonzalez, your term is expiring here in a few days, and this might be the last time that I see you in this type of format. So I just wanted to say from Weld County's perspective and from me personally, thank you for your work here on the commission. It's been a pleasure to get to know you a little bit and get to chat off on the side at events such as the Garfield County Symposium that you were at and I was at. And I just wanted to thank you for your work in forwarding oil and gas permitting within the state of Colorado. And I hope our paths cross sometime soon in the future. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it.
Have a good day.
Great. All right, we will now recognize Ms. Jost.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Chair. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if I may.
Ms. Jost, for the record, you might explain, and I'm sure you're probably going to do this anyway, why this is titled Great Western, and then why the folks that we're listening to are from PDC.
Yes, absolutely. And we will hit that. Vanessa Chase will hit that, and then I can explain it as well here too. We do have it noted here on the first slide, but I will go ahead and dive in and start with that, Chair Robbins. So first off, good morning, commissioners, commission staff, Mr. Maxey, and members of the public. My name is Jamie Jost from Jost Energy Law, and I, along with my partner, Kelsey Wazelinski, represent PDC Energy, formerly Great Western Operating Company. PDC Energy did acquire Great Western's assets in May, and that is why you're seeing this presentation from PDC this morning. We do have a group of subject matter experts that does include 2 representatives from Great Western that have carried over to PDC as well to help answer some questions today. This BRO OGDP application was one of the earliest OGDPs filed under the new mission change rules in 2021, before much of the OGDP guidance was actually put in place. And so I think I can speak for everyone involved that we are very grateful to the commission staff and the director for their work and dedication on this application. We're happy to be here presenting to you today, and we really look forward to our discussion. PDC's presentation will include a variety of topics, including the general background of the BRO OGDP application and location, their community engagement, as well as the BMPs that will be applied. And we have 2 forms of requested relief as part of this BRO OGDP application today. First, PDC seeks approval of an approximate 1,436.7 acre OGDP for the development of the total of 30 new horizontal wells to be developed from 1 multi-well pad for the production of oil and gas and associated hydrocarbons from the Niobrara, Fort Hays, Codell, and Carlisle formations. We do have a director's recommendation that provides that the director has determined that the OGDP complies with all applicable requirements of the commission's rules and recommends approval by the commission. The second requested relief is that PDC does seek approval of an amendment to order number 407-3150 to reflect the subsurface setbacks requested in the application. And the director's recommendation did address these setbacks as well, and it confirmed that the unit setbacks requested in the hearing application are appropriate and supported by engineering testimony, and they eliminate the need for individual wellbore spacing units. So Vanessa Chase and Brian Cocchieri will be presenting the BRO OGDP application to the commission today, but we do also have several subject matter experts with us who are available to answer any specific questions that may arise during the presentation or after. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Vanessa and Brian.
Good morning, commissioners. I'm Vanessa Chase, Regulatory Supervisor for PDC. As you previously heard during our Kenosha OGDP hearing, and as Jamie mentioned, PDC acquired all Great Western assets in May of 2022 and will ultimately be the operator of the BRO OGDP. Upon approval of the OGDP and COGCC assignment of a location ID, PDC will file Form 9 intent and subsequence to update the operator of record. PDC and Great Western currently maintain all financial assurance, insurance, and operator clearance with the COGCC. It's important to note that PDC has fully reviewed the Bro OGDP application and citing of the location. We have also applied PDC BMP operational standards to the final Form 2A, which include produced water takeaway, ensuring a tankless hydrocarbon storage design, revised the haul route, confirmed CPW review and waiver for Rule 1202A3, and evaluated for sequential development opportunities within the area. Next slide. As Jamie noted, the Bro OGDP was one of the first OGDPs filed under the new rules that were effective in 2021 and was used by COGC staff to help aid in the formulation of internal process, guidance, and expectations for OGDP applications. Although there were 4 submissions of the application, each of these were submitted to comply with specific requests from the COGCC staff as they determined what they needed in an OGDP application, as well as how staff would handle certain overlapping units in GWA as a development tool. Great Western worked hand in hand with staff on the revision in each amended application and welcomed the beta testing, if you will, aspect of the OGDP process. A few important dates are worthy of mentioning this morning. Weld County approved the WOGLA for the Bro location on February 25th, 2021. The OGDP application was filed in June of 2021 and received completeness in March of 2022. The petition deadline of May 30th, 2022 came and went without any petition filings, and we are now in front of you on an uncontested and supported OGDP application. We do have a few supplemental slides at the end of the PowerPoint that illustrate the evolution of the Bro OGDP application if you have any questions about where we started and where we are today. The Bro oil and gas location is located in an industrial park and will ultimately be an 8.6 acre pad located in Weld County, with the town of Windsor being a proximate local government. This multi-well location is planned to develop 30 new horizontal wells in 2 established drilling and spacing units. There are no residential building units within 2,000 feet of the working pad surface, no schools, childcare centers, high occupancy building units, or priority habitat. There is no requirement for an ALA under the Commission's rules, and a lesser impact area exemption request was granted by the Director. This is not an application to be considered under 604B4 under the substantially equivalent standard. As illustrated on the last slide, the Bro pad is located within an industrial park. You can see the industrial nature of the area on this map. There are a total of 6 non-residential building units within 2,000 feet of the working pad surface. However, there are 67 building units listed on the Form 2A, simply due to the square footage of these building units. All building unit owners and tenants were fully informed of the planned operations at the proposed Bro location through the OGDP completeness notice and notice of hearing. The only feedback received during the public comment period related to traffic and haul route concerns, which Great Western and now PDC has continued to address with the building unit owners, Weld County, and the town of Windsor. Directly in response to the public comments received, as well as in consideration of the town of Windsor, PDC completed a traffic study to determine the existing roadway and traffic conditions in the vicinity of the location. As a result of the consistent community engagement, PDC revised the haul route and ensures traffic control during operations. Will also take responsibility for all road maintenance and repairs needed that are caused by PDC from the Bro location to Eastman Park Drive. Additionally, PDC has also committed to oil, gas, and water takeaway. By adding the produced water pipeline, the estimated truck traffic has been reduced by greater than 90% during the production phase. WOGLA approval for the Bro pad was received on February 25th, 2021. Additionally, the town of Windsor has agreed to and supports the location and haul route revision. PDC submitted a sundry request to Weld County for the revised haul route on June 15th, 2022, and will proceed with the Weld County hearing on July 14th to formally amend the haul route within the WOGLA permit. Additionally, PDC will also update the floodplain permit to reflect the adjustment of the haul route. On August 2nd, 2021, Great Western submitted a request for a lesser impact area exemption for the floodplain ALA requirement. This request was made due to the Weld County floodplain permit being approved on April 16, 2021, along with the robust best management practices that ensure avoidance of floodplain impacts. Subsequently, the director granted the lesser impact area exemption, which waived the requirement for an ALA to be submitted with the Form 2A. During the staff's review of the Bro OGDP, Director Murphy requested a brief summary of why the nearby Kodak South Pad is not being used to drill these wells in an effort to consolidate operations. Great Western provided, and PDC agrees, numerous reasons for its determination that the Kodak South Pad is not suitable for expansion. I will not read all of these to you, but upon PDC review, a few reasons stand out, such as the Kodak South Pad provides no additional benefit of minimization or mitigation for development, as Kodak South is also within the floodplain. Due to the number of wells that would be drilled from the Bro pad and the remaining 26 wells to be drilled from the Kodak South pad, there would be very little, if any, opportunity to combine equipment. Due to the amount of equipment and space needed to accommodate the Bro wells, as well as other technical and measurement challenges, any expansion of the Kodak South pad would not result in any meaningful surface consolidation compared to a separate Bro pad. Additionally, an expansion of the Kodak South pad would be in conflict with the executed SUA and impact the surface owner's future plans to utilize the land to the east for railroad storage operations. Upon the director's thorough review of the Kodak South pad, the director recognized PDC's intent is to develop the Kodak South pad and the proposed Bro pad sequentially. And due to simultaneous operations, PDC needs both pads to safely and effectively develop these locations in order to finish out all pre-production operations in this area. I will now turn the presentation over to Brian Coshier to discuss operational development.
Thank you, Vanessa, and thank you to the director, staff, and commission for the time dedicated to the Bro application. I'm Brian Coshier, Manager of Operational Compliance and Policy. If approved, PDC will initiate construction in the first quarter of 2023, with drilling in the second quarter of 2023 and completions in the first quarter of 2024. PDC's strategy is to occupy a geographic area once to develop the entirety of the mineral acreage position. For this, PDC will develop the remaining Kodak South wells in conjunction with the Bro location. This is the reason for the timing between drilling and completions, in addition to the need to have both the Bro and Kodak South locations, which allows for PDC to conduct simultaneous operations. PDC fully supports the Great Western application, but due to the synergies of the merger of the two assets, we were able to evaluate the location under a new lens. Due to the robust water infrastructure PDC has adjacent to the Bro development, we will be extending a tie-in for both the Bro and Kodak South location into this water takeaway system. By having both oil and water piped off these locations, we will eliminate upwards of 90% of the traffic to the locations during the production phase, greatly reducing emissions and nuisance due to truck traffic. As for PDC's usual suite of BMPs, PDC will have a tankless hydrocarbon storage facility design, and we will commit to evaluate the electrification of the Bro location prior to the commencement of pre-production operations. Additionally, as PDC currently utilizes and has committed to on future development locations, a Group 3 oil-based fluid will be used during drilling of the production string on the Bro pad. Due to the Bro development, 7 legacy Great Western wells will be plugged with 3 associated facilities to be decommissioned and reclaimed. PDC will commit to work with COGCC on the emissions reductions based on the Colorado emission inventory from the associated facilities. An ambient noise survey was conducted, which indicated DVC levels higher than the prescribed regulations due to the industrial nature of the area. So we would then be regulated to the cumulative noise standards within 423D. For this, PDC will minimize our contribution to potential impacts to noise by constructing 32-foot sound walls around our location for pre-production operations and permanent sound mitigation around our compression on the production facility. As for potential lighting impacts, as per usual PDC BMPs, light fixtures will be placed beneath the top of the wall and angled in a downward direction for pre-production operations, and no permanent lighting will be located at the Bro facility for production operations. I will now pass it back to Vanessa to conclude our presentation.
PDC's tankless hydrocarbon storage design significantly reduces the potential for spills and leaks during the production phase. CPW previously completed a thorough review of the borough location and concluded that there is sufficient protections that will be implemented through the proposed BMPs, as well as an existing raised railroad between the borough location and the nearby ditches that provides another level of protection to alleviate all surface water concerns. PDC confirmed the CPW review on June 17th and obtained a more detailed waiver from CPW. Additional BMPs within the approved floodplain permit include remote shut-in capability, weather and flood monitoring to ensure preparedness for rapid flood response, as well as all tanks will be anchored to the ground. The borough location has been designed to ensure the utmost stormwater protection. This plan includes grading during construction, increased secondary containment of a minimum of 200% of the volume of the largest containment vessel, as well as berms, ditches, and sediment traps will be installed for perimeter control. Air monitoring will be conducted in accordance with AQCC's regulations in an effort to detect, evaluate, and reduce emissions. Monitoring will be conducted as a baseline and then continuously through drilling, completion, and the first 6 months of production. PDC guarantees that vigorous operational protections will be in place to ensure avoidance, minimization, and mitigation of adverse impacts to public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources. These practices include, but are not limited to, avoidance of sensitive receptors such as residential building units, a tankless hydrocarbon storage design, oil, gas, and water takeaway, a quiet frac fleet, enhanced secondary and tertiary containment measures, sound walls, daily inspections at production facilities, 24/7 remote monitoring, and remote shut-in capability. PDC believes that the borough oil and gas location is the most protective location of the public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources, and includes best management practices to avoid, minimize, and mitigate temporary impacts to the community and the environment. The borough OGDP is supported by Weld County as the relevant local government, Town of Windsor as the proximate local government, and the director's recommendation. PDC requests that the commission approve an approximate 1,436.7 acre OGDP for the development of a total of 30 new horizontal wells to be developed from one multi-well pad for the production of oil, gas, and associated hydrocarbons from the Niobrara, Fort Hays, Codell, and Carlisle formations, and also approve an amendment to order number 407-3150 for the requested setbacks. To wrap up the presentation, we would like to illustrate the lay of the land with these aerial photos that were recently taken shown on this slide. PDC would like to extend its appreciation to the staff, director, and commissioners for all the hard work on the borough OGDP. Thank you very much, and we anticipate any questions that you might have regarding this OGDP.
Great. Thank you all for a great presentation to us for the borough oil and gas location 2106-00105. With that, we now have the panel before us, commissioners, for any questions that you may have or we may have. Commissioner McGowan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation. And I appreciate you answering questions I had, and it felt late for me to send those questions in. So I apologize. I didn't get a chance to talk with our OGLAs until late. So thank you. I did forget to ask, with the 30 wells, it looks like the application also has 44 separators, and I'm used to seeing wells equal separators. And I'm wondering why there appear to be so many more separators for this application.
Thank you, Commissioner McGowan, and I apologize, there's construction above if there's loud noises. When we initially reviewed the application post-acquisition, we thought the same thing upon just first looking at it. The difference is the difference in the methodology of nomenclature. So what you see on the facility drawing will be constructed as is. We will have an individual separator for each well. The difference is, PDC historically calls our scrubbers and our knockouts as such, where they were counted as separators on the application. The knockouts just usually knock out, fluids from a single phase gas stream. through a larger diameter and controlled velocity. So at the time of our Form 45 submittal, which will be the as-built, we will have the nomenclature addressed as PDC normally does. So, but rest assured, there is only one separator per well. It's just a nomenclature difference.
Thank you. I appreciate that. As you can tell, I'm getting good enough to be dangerous to understand some of this stuff. And so it was a little confusing to me. So thanks for that explanation.
Yep.
Further questions, Commissioner Messner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a couple of little questions. I'm still a little confused about the haul route. But I mean, I understand where it's being proposed and stuff, but this is a haul route that PDC is now proposing in cooperation with the town of Windsor, understanding it still needs to go through the Weld County WOGLA amendment process in order to be able to be a real thing. And there was notice given to additional stakeholders that perhaps approved the original haul route. Do I have that right?
Thanks for your question, Brian DeRose, Surface Land Supervisor here at PDC. You are correct. As Vanessa mentioned in the presentation, really we listen to our stakeholders, our building unit owners nearby, and their concerns regarding the traffic going on Kodak Drive, and really made those adjustments to go north on Lithoplate Drive to Eastman Park, with ultimately Windsor's approval and support of that route.
Okay.
You are correct.
And I will acknowledge that you have also committed to piping takeaway of the produced water, which dramatically decreases the amount of truck traffic. And so I really appreciate that. I think that's a big deal in this particular location. And then this is just a question. It doesn't actually affect my review of the application, but just a question in general. As far as the ALA goes, and I understand that you applied for and received a waiver for the ALA because it was in a floodplain, and I understand that. But in a lot of these situations where you are going through the WOGLA process at Weld County, there is an ALA that is associated with those in every application. I guess, what's your thought process between not just submitting that ALA versus asking for a waiver in our process?
I think Katie, I don't know if you want to address this from the WOGLA side.
Sure. Good morning, commissioners. My name is Katie Gillen. I'm a transition specialist and former environmental manager for Great Western. So we had obtained a floodplain permit, approved floodplain permit from Weld County, which included conditions of approval, as well as, a robust set of BMPs that would ensure that we avoided, minimized, and mitigated impacts to the floodplain. I'm kind of happy to go through, those BMPs in more detail to answer your question, Commissioner Messner, if that's specifically what you were asking.
I wasn't concerned about the BMPs. I guess it was just a process, an application process piece, because we do allow for substantial equivalent information to be provided to the COGCC as part of our process, particularly with local governments that have significant oil and gas regulations or review processes. And I will note that WOGLA process has an ALA requirement. And so, I'm always curious why operators don't choose to just submit that as substantially equivalent ALA versus requesting a waiver, because anytime there's a waiver, it raises a red flag for me as far as paying extra close attention to that particular situation. I think that the waiver that was given is appropriate. I think the BMPs are appropriate. I think the utilization of the receipt of the floodplain hazard mitigation plan is appropriate. This is just a process question since I have you all here.
Yeah, and Commissioner Messner, I'm happy to jump in here too. I think one of the things that we need to all remember is that when we went through this with Weld County, I think we were also working through the new rules. And so recognizing that, you know, the substantially equivalent seems to be tied in many instances to a 604B4 application, which this wasn't. You know, we worked closely with Weld County on the floodplain permit to obtain the permit. We actually had a meeting, I think it was in August of 2021 with the COGCC staff regarding the floodplain permit. All the BMPs did a pretty detailed presentation to the staff about that to obtain the waiver, because recognizing where we are now, like a year and a half down the road, the substantially equivalent, I think, carries more weight than, you know, we originally thought, I would say, a year ago. So I think this is really good points to take for future applications and how they work with the local governments that do require the ALA, especially when coming in and seeking waivers under floodplain permits. So maybe I'll kind of stop there, but I think it's a really good point and a really good question to bring up from the procedural aspects as OGDPs proceed forward.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't have any further questions.
Any further questions for the panel? All right, I'm not seeing any further questions. That means that we would move into commissioner deliberations. Does any commissioner desire to start with the deliberations? Commissioner Messner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I reviewed this with an eye, realizing that this was one of the first OGDPs that came in, that there was going to be, you know, a lot of different iterations as we worked through the implementation of the mission change rules. I think staff and Great Western and now PDC have worked in collaboration and trying to come up with the process that ultimately was the review of this and the director's recommendation. I think that the application is appropriate in its location. I think it has the adequate information provided in it. I think it's, I appreciate that PDC continues to try to refine the application, including the piping and takeaway of produced water and the modification of the haul routes to continue to mitigate the potential impacts of the trucking. And so I'm in support of this application as it's presented.
Further comments, deliberations, Commissioner Gonzalez?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I don't have much in the way of deliberations. I'm in support of this application and I would move to approve it.
We have a motion to approve the application. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there further commentary or deliberations? I would just note in my commentary that yes, I agree with my fellow commissioners. I'm in favor of this application. As with the Kenosha application that we recently reviewed, I think this is an excellent example of protective permitting under Colorado's oil and gas development rules. I think I appreciate the refinements brought by PDC to the application. And I think that they've done a good job. So good job to the applicant. And as well, I always want to acknowledge the great work of our staff in reviewing these complex applications. This has been on the books for a while. And I believe that our staff has done an excellent job in review and ensuring refinement to be in compliance with their rules. And then finally, I want to again thank Mr. Maxey and Weld County for their review and input. That's an important component to the review that is finalized here with the COGCC. With those comments, all those in favor of the application indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Application passes. Thank you very much, panel. Appreciate you being with us.
Great, thank you, Chair. Could we have 1 minute? I think just to say a thank you to Commissioner Gonzalez. We have been very grateful for your work and dedication and everything you've done for purposes of the commission and taking on your role here. And really just want to thank you for your thoughtful comments, your discussions, and everything else you've provided to everyone who's been in front of you. So I say this on behalf of Kelsey and myself, and I know that Brian Kochieri wanted to jump in as well.
Yeah, Commissioner Gonzalez, on behalf of PDC and myself, we would just like to thank you for, obviously the 2 years of service, but really the insightful dialogue that you brought to this commission and really getting to know you and work with you over these last couple of years. You look back at really what was accomplished over the last couple of years, through the mission change and now on the implementation side, it's actually pretty incredible. So we just want to thank you for everything you've done in this process.
I appreciate the kind words. It's been a pleasure.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Commissioners, we have one other matter this morning. Why don't we take a 10-minute break and come back at 10:55, and then we'll take up our next docket at that time. All right, welcome back. This is the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. We are taking up docket 2202-00033. This is an oil and gas development plan request by TEP Rocky Mountain LLC. And we, again, just to confirm, we do not have public comment on this, correct, Ms. Larson?
That is correct.
Very good. Then we will go to a presentation by TEP. I see Mr. Jewell is with us. Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioner Robbins. Glad we're shaving a few minutes here. Michael Jewell again from Jewell Jimerson Natural Resources Law on behalf of TEP Rocky Mountain LLC. Proud to be the largest operator in the Piceance, and also proud to state that we are up to date on our financial assurances and looking forward to affirming that further and having a new industry model really with our application that will encompass all new regulations. So thank you for your hard work there. I am joined today by another familiar face, Mr. Jeff Kirtland, Regulatory Manager for TEP Rocky Mountain. He'll be available to address any questions and also offer some more color to my presentation afterwards with a few questions to be answered. And I'd be remiss not to publicly thank Dave Cabesco, Ginger Malashauskas, and the rest of your staff for all the hard work, not only in this OGDP, but in others. Their insights really make these sharpened. And you saw that this one was amended, but I want to remind that none of these amendments were anything violative or operation planning failure. It's really coming together to synergize. How do we make these things talk correctly, if you will? How do we measure acreage in the Piceance, a little different than the Wattenberg? How do we recognize existing wells and exclude them? That sort of thing. So thank you again for that conversation. And certainly without missing the obvious, we want to take our turn and thank you, Commissioner Gonzalez. You had an ability to analogize among the basins, and that's really important to us since in the Piceance, we're drilling for gas, we're doing directional, vertical drilling, that sort of thing. And so that insight was quite helpful to kind of grease the skids for all these conversations. We'll miss that experience, but we'll wish you well in your next endeavor and also welcome your replacement to the commission. So on to the technicalities. We're presenting you today docket number 2202-00033, TEP's Honey OGDP, asking for you to approve an order for an approximate 337 acre oil and gas development plan that also comprises an 8.86 acre surface location for that 337 acres of mineral development pursuant to rules 303 and 503 G1 for the production of natural gas and its associated hydrocarbons from the Williams Fork. We request that be developed from 18 wells drilled from the Honey 1905 well pad on certain lands in 7 South, ranges 93 and 94 West in 6 Principal Meridian in Garfield County. A few quick points to that. These are all directional wells, again, not larger and more intrusive horizontal wells for our environment. The minerals developed from this OGDP originate from both fee and federal leases. The surface location overlays a fee lease. The BLM has completed its NEPA environmental assessment. It recently approved the associated APDs relative to the wells, and we anticipate approval of the associated rights of way to go with those APDs. No alternative location analysis was necessary, and therefore no oil and gas permit from Garfield County was necessitated under their county land use and development code. As I like to say, most importantly for all, we note this application comes before you without protest. And when I say that, I mean formal and informal. We haven't received any unresolved calls or anything internally, or even matters of significant concern from your staff. The director's recommendation included a wonderfully clear and thorough assessment that wedded together our application, the technical forms, public comment, and internal analysis. I really like the way that is drafted. I think it's a really great tool for the public and for this commission to review. So I'll try not to rehash those details, but we'll briefly refer to those if more detail is needed. So now, while we would never bring a request to you that we thought was not in compliance with the rules, we are sensitive enough to the fact that there are, well, sensitivities to any operation, particularly in the Piceance, when it comes to wildlife and other measures. So we want to approach those head on right now in a discussion with you so we can give you that deep confidence to earn your vote for the approval of this honey OGDP. So to that end, a quick roadmap. We have 2 sets of 3 items. The first set is emission change standards that I will discuss, grouped by 1, public health and environment, 2, safety and welfare, and 3, wildlife. I will then pass it over to Mr. Kirtland, and he'll have the second set of 3 items to answer questions about our existing locations and how we're using those, migratory bird season, and thirdly, the location and pad design relative to Honey Spring. So jumping right into public health and environment, our core points that I want to deliver to you. TEP, as mentioned before, has participated and will continue to participate in the AQCC rulemakings. When I say participate, I mean we were, in a sense, vulnerable by telling them how we, Terra, are going to do our part to help with emissions and what concrete steps we are taking to achieve those ends. And those steps will be implemented as far as possible in this honey OGDP. We anticipate, again, keeping that feedback loop with AQCC. We've also been involved as a party with the EPA rulemaking in offering the same insight and collaborative potential. Secondly, and Jeff will go into this in more detail, we are planning to utilize 3 existing oil and gas locations. This is not the first time you heard this from us. All 3 of our previous OGDPs have some sort of recycling the land component, and we really enjoy doing that whenever possible and making sure we are minimizing our disturbance. So hopefully that pattern is being noticed. Thirdly, to this public health and environment point, we're using an existing access road similar to the existing well pads. That's Garfield County Road 317, 317A. And lastly, TEP provided BMPs that reduce, minimize, mitigate impacts to water and environmental resources, including the standard engineering controls and administrative controls. Staff has included these on the 2A. And staff concluded that the risk of impacts to water and the environment will be minimized by the successful implementation of these BMPs. So real quickly, number 2, safety and welfare. Happy to report that the OGLA found no particular items of concern for this application. We remain vigilant to reduce the effects of lighting and sound pollution, which again, we would operationally reduce anyway. It's the right thing to do. A few BMPs that directly relate to my next point in wildlife protection also kind of blend into safety and welfare as well. So on that note, wildlife resources, Colorado provides home to 3 of the 14 subspecies of the cutthroat trout. And, you know, they grow bigger here. They love the cold water that our mountains provide. They can grow up to 9 to 16 inches. But those 3 subspecies are the Colorado River, Rio Grande, and the Greenback cutthroat trout. Now, it's that Greenback that gets the most attention because it is protected at the federal and the state level. The most important thriving Greenback cutthroat trout population is located along a 4-mile stretch of Bear Creek near Colorado Springs, quite a good distance from the Piceance Basin, and we know the good folks there are doing what they can to increase that habitat into its historic range. But that's not our fish. We're talking about the Colorado River and the Rio Grande cutthroat trout, which are no less majestic for sure. And while not considered endangered, they're an important species of concern in Colorado, if nothing less than that they represent a classic icon of the outdoors in Colorado. So we believe protection is critical, not only to preserve and expand their riparian habitat, but maintain those cold, clean waters that are essential for them to thrive and have space away from the rainbow trout, which apparently is a bit of a bully species or an interbreeding species for them. So we do our part to promote these efforts in the honey OGDP because although this location does not fall within CPW's mapped HPH, the proposed natural gas and produced water pipelines will bore under the critical habitat of Beaver Creek. The additional cost is the right thing to do to make sure the habitat is protected. A timely public commenter mentioned that the water conditions were of supreme importance, and he was correct. DEP was proud to, or glad to receive that note, and as our response indicated, boring under will mitigate just about completely any threat to temperatures over that portion of water or anything that would relate to oil and gas affecting the clarity of that water. So this proposed 2-pipeline board system into HPH required consultation with CPW under Rule 309. TEP not only met with CPW multiple times, but we do remain in constant contact, if not daily contact, with Mr. Elm and other experts at CPW, because as you know, we have so many timing restrictions and other habitat management responsibilities that we take seriously. And a lot of those calendars for those species, if you will, overlap a good bit. So the key to the success is making sure we're constantly talking with CPW to make sure our timing is always right, that our mitigation efforts are modernized and spot on with known science. So a few BMPs I want to run through with you. These are in the director's report, but it kind of digested a bit for our purposes here. As a threshold matter, construction of the produced water pipeline will be completed when there is no or very little flow in the intermittent streams. Beaver Creek is an intermittent stream, and while seasonally it's extremely important to the endemic habitat, its contribution to the ecology of the area peaks at high flow season, which is that spring runoff. That time has passed. Our planned construction begins in July, so we are avoiding that. Above all, Rule 1202B, the gas pipeline will be bored under. TEP will stage a spill response trailer adjacent to Beaver Creek, have all the supplies ready at all times. Stormwater control measures will be installed to minimize the potential for sediment migration from the work area to any seasonal and adjacent streams. Reclamation of both new pipeline corridors within HPH will be completely and immediately reclaimed following construction activities. Based on our estimated time frame, it's quite doubtful that our proposed activities will interfere with the cutthroat trout spawning season at all. So moving away a little bit from the cutthroat trout and a little more broadly for wildlife, a few more BMPs for this honey location. We tentatively scheduled construction of this pad beginning, as I said, in July. And this has some implication for migratory birds. I will leave that detail more to Jeff, but suffice to say, we fully intend to comply with Rule 1202A8, that if any nests are found, we will complete all mitigation measures incumbent. Where possible, number 2, TEP will utilize potable water from a nearby source instead of raw water for dust suppression to avoid the spread of disease organisms and aquatic nuisance into Beaver Creek. And by where possible, I mean that's the default. Only in circumstances where we cannot get that water will we use the raw water. To minimize the potential for wildlife-related traffic accidents, we have speed traps, speed restrictions, and require all employees and agents of ours to follow that posted speed limit, and also any timing access restrictions that are associated. All trucks on location will turn those loud diesel engines off when they're not in use. Site lighting will be shielded and directed, as I said before, in case you could see it from any home or other living area, if you will. There's not much in the way of towns out here, but also to prevent wildlife disturbance as well. And lastly, TEP will also minimize direct impact to wildlife by utilizing existing infrastructure and disturbance corridors. And lastly, we'll be using Weld telemetry equipment to minimize site visitation. And based on the pad location, proposed schedule, and wildlife protection BMP, staff concluded there are no significant potential adverse effects to wildlife. So with that, I think my initial remarks are concluded. So I'll hand it over to Mr. Jeff Kirtland, who will review the 3 broader and more encapsulating questions for our discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Joel, and good morning, commissioners. Appreciate the opportunity to appear in front of you this morning, and I'll just echo my appreciation for you, Commissioner Gonzalez, and wish you good luck, and appreciate all the help and work and education that you've provided along the way here. But we did receive 3 questions, and I wanted, as we have in previous OGDP hearings, to just run through the questions and respond to each of those, and then we can open it up for additional questions from commissioners. Hopefully this will answer the majority of these questions. So first, excuse me, first, can the operator please include in their presentation how existing locations will be used to reduce impacts? And thank you very much for this question. Generally, the use of existing locations for us reduces the need to construct new locations, which effectively would result in additional disturbance of habitat in undisturbed areas. So that's probably the biggest reason we want to utilize and recycle our existing locations. However, it also helps us to reduce the density of oil and gas locations within rangeland, and it more efficiently locates wells and facilities in areas that have already been disturbed. This allows us to centralize facilities and utilize existing infrastructure in previously disturbed right-of-ways that reduce these impacts. Reducing impacts through these means is important in our discussions with CPW and BLM, who obviously balance the impacts of wildlife and biological resources based on disturbance of habitat, which can be used as food sources and winter breeding grounds. I would also add that disturbance of land creates additional stormwater concerns. And so by reducing the need to build new locations, we reduce the impact on stormwater. So in lieu of constructing new locations specific to the Honey Oak UDP, we propose to reconstruct and slightly expand the Honey 1905 pad, as we've described in the application, to support our drilling operations. Additionally, we propose to use an existing pad called the Uberg RU-44-7 pad, which has been used as a remote well completion and flowback location for several pads in the area. And I will note that this pad is north of our proposed Honey pad, which is an existing pad as well. But this pad is north, and it has access to this pad that makes it much more easy for our completion equipment. And I think it was noted by Mr. Maxey this morning that commissioners were out in Garfield County several months ago and had an opportunity to drive up the side of the mountain and enjoy a little celebration. What I will note here is that the further south you go, the more steep and more inaccessible these pads can be. So by utilizing the Uberg 44-7 pad, we have much more success and accessibility with our completion equipment. This pad is also, the RU-44-7 is also much closer in proximity to the next pad that we are utilizing, which is the Beaver Creek frac pit. And this is a pond that has been utilized historically for this area as a centralized location to recycle and transport produced water. And so we've got a lot of experience between the RU-44-7 pad and the Beaver Creek pit. Finally, the Uberg SR-4312 pad will allow TEP to manage the produced water by utilizing existing infrastructure that is connected to our extensive water management system. We've talked a lot about that historically in terms of our ability to recycle our produced water and treat and manage that water. So that pad, the SR-4312 pad, will house and collect that produced water, and then it will enter into our existing infrastructure. And then finally, Summit Midstream, who also operates existing gas gathering system in the area, will allow us to loop into their proposed gas pipe, through our proposed gas pipeline, to loop into their system. And that allows us to reduce our impacts and create additional pipeline corridors. So essentially, these existing facilities provide the space required to efficiently drill and complete proposed wells without requiring construction of a larger pad or additional pads for temporary long-term equipment. And essentially, our proposed use of existing facilities minimizes impact to the greatest extent in lieu of building new pads. With that, I'll move to the second question. And the question is, can TEP explain why operations cannot happen outside of the migratory bird season? First, I'll state that TEP will be in compliance with the Migratory Bird Act as required by Rule 1202A8. And effectively, we're working with a very constrained timeline. And we effectively have two timing limitations that are in conflict and overlapping to some extent with our time frame. One of these with the migratory bird concern allows for identification of presence through surveying to confirm if the TL even applies. And then the second, of course, is big game timing limitation, which would require us to be granted an exception. So construction is proposed to begin in July 2022, following the approval of this OGDP hopefully today, and then the subsequent Form 2A. Due to the construction starting before August 31st, which is when the migratory bird TL ends, we will have to then complete a pre-construction nesting migratory bird survey as required by the rule. And if a nest is located, then we will have to provide a work zone buffer. But delaying construction till after the migratory bird season will effectively push all of our construction activity into the winter TL. And that is obviously going to impact the big game habitat. And as we mentioned earlier, the honey and 1905 pad is not within HPH, but it is the construction of the pipelines that are of concern. So we can follow the rule and ensure that if there is a presence and the TL does go into effect, then we would follow the rule with respect to a work zone buffer, and that's allowable. And I'll also mention that a lot of this was discussed with CPW. BLM is involved, obviously, and so there's been a lot of discussion about this topic. So hopefully that excuse me, that got to the issue there. Finally, the question here: could the pad be designed so that storage is more than 500 feet away from the honey spring? And this question is with regard to that buffer. What I'll say here is that the honey spring one is located 158 feet north of the working pad surface of our existing oil and gas location, the honey 1905 pad. Approximately 2/3 of this proposed oil and gas location is located within that 500 foot of the spring. Through this planning, TEP has located the majority of our permanent production equipment along the southwest side of the oil and gas location. So just to orient you, the spring is to the north of the pad, and our equipment is located as far away as possible from that spring. So the proposed chemical tanks are just inside the 500 foot buffer, and our blowdown tank, condensate tanks, and our production equipment is also just within that 500 foot buffer. But again, it's the furthest from that spring in our final plan. To minimize surface disturbance and to avoid impacts to the adjacent White River National Forest property, which is south, expansion of that our oil and gas location is very difficult and is limited. So we're effectively constrained by that White River National Forest property, which actually borders the southern part of our pad. So the size of the pad is constrained also because of the fact that we're utilizing a cuttings trench along the south side. So we have some inability to basically go beyond that. But I will say that the design that we're proposing is actually our second design. We had originally proposed a design where those tanks were located actually on the northern side of the pad. Through consultation with BLM in April of 2021, we actually redesigned the pad to relocate all of the equipment to the southern side of the pad, and obviously with respect to this buffer rule. But additionally, TEP consulted with CPW regarding this operating requirement, and we obtained a waiver to the rule 1202A3 on the basis that adequate stormwater control measures would be installed at the oil and gas location to protect it against the impacts of the spring, and that we would also set up an emergency spill equipment to be located in the area so that we had immediate response ability here as well. So again, that's sort of an overview of what our efforts are to be very cognizant of our responsibility with that spring. And I hope that that got to that question as well. So I'll stop there. I know Commissioners probably have additional questions, and appreciate your time. Mr. Jewell, I'll turn back to you just real quick.
Thank you, Jeff. And Commissioners, that's our two groups of three that we have for you. I think we covered any areas of significant concern. But again, thank you for your review, your timing here, and we're at your mercy for questions. Thank you very much.
Questions? Commissioner McGowan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And no questions. I'm just super appreciative of your explanation of you're kind of caught in between the trout and the birds and the big game. So I appreciated that kind of filling in the detail of like your timing and how you're trying to work through it, and the explanation of what you're trying to do with migratory birds. And I also appreciate further explanation of why the pad is set up the way that it is. And I think that you've probably done as much as you can given that location. And I also am appreciative that you have thought about use of existing locations to minimize total cumulative impacts. And I appreciate you putting that detail together. I kept trying to look at the map and figure out like where different things were coming from and how it was all fitting together. And so I appreciate the further narrative. So with that, I think I appreciate the further responses, and I feel comfortable with this application.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got a couple of questions. I'm trying to understand the timing of the EA, and I think it's the Upper Beaver EA and associated with right-of-ways and takeaways, and how that affects this application in front of us today.
Thank you, Commissioner Mesner. What I can tell you is that we have received the approved EA for the Upper Beaver Creek project, and that actually includes a couple pads. And we have actually received the approved APDs, as Mr. Buell alluded to as well. And then any right-of-ways are forthcoming that would need to be approved. So effectively, the EA has to be, NEPA and the EA has to be approved first, and then the APDs and the right-of-ways are approved there afterwards. So we expect that those approvals are forthcoming.
Did that approved EA have any additional BMPs associated with Beaver Creek and the proposed pipeline through there that are different than what you've proposed in this application?
I've actually just received that EA, so I would have to review that to know for sure. But generally, there are pretty standard COAs associated with this area. We've got a lot of experience with BLM in this area, particularly around Beaver Creek. I think, as I described earlier, the fact that we redesigned this pad to move equipment, effectively away from the springs, away from the Beaver Creek area. But I will tell you that there certainly are timing limitations that are included in our activities, which is part of why we're constrained. So there are COAs relative to migratory birds, TL, big game, that are consistent with what CPW is applying as well. So we are mindful of those requirements.
Okay.
Commissioner Messer, may I add?
Of course.
And also the COAs and the APDs. I reviewed those, and I counted 13, which is about par for the course for lands that are of this level of sensitivity. The language mirrors what we're accustomed to in our leases and previous APDs. They're stringent, they're also proper, and they mirror what your staff here has required of us, and that we're doing on our own also.
Okay. And then my only other question, just because I'm a little confused around the dust suppression piece and the potable water versus the raw water, because my understanding is that particularly during the time that that construction is going to be occurring, and understanding that dust suppression doesn't necessarily just happen during construction time, but my understanding is it's an intermittent stream, Beaver Creek, and it may or may not actually have water in it when dust suppression needed to happen. And I mean, I guess how do you access that raw water out of a dry stream bed?
Yeah, it's a challenge for sure. You know, we're sensitive to ensuring that the water that we use for dust mitigation is from the area. So, you know, there are other means to get fresh water that work within that area. Detail wise, I guess I'd have to follow up with you on that. I don't, you know, when we have a challenging of a dry stream that we normally get water from, you know, it requires us to get fresh water from a different source. But the point being that we are utilizing, you know, water that's compliant with use.
Okay. Those are the only questions I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions? I don't have any questions. Appreciate the questions from my fellow commissioners. I think you guys have done a good job in favor of the OGDP. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve TEP's Honey OGDP.
Second.
Motion and a second. Further deliberation. Good job, guys. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. The TEP Honey OGDP docket number 220203 is approved.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, commissioners. Appreciate your time and consideration as always.
Very good.
Thank you.
Us as well. Commissioners, as was announced at the beginning of the hearing, we have several enforcement matters that are the remaining items on our docket today. We will need to take a break until 1 p.m. So that we can allow our enforcement officers to be with us this afternoon. So with that, we will break and we will return at 1 p.m. for the remainder of the docket. All right, welcome back. We're going to get started for the afternoon session of the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. The next matter on our docket is three enforcement matters. The first is docket number 2105-00079, Black Resources Incorporated, operator number 8725. Who am I recognizing for presentation of this docket?
Good afternoon, Chair Robbins. I think I'm going to try to handle the presentation portion.
Okay, and before we do that, Ms. Larson, can you confirm whether there's anyone from the operator in attendance in our panel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do not see anyone from Black Resources in the meeting. If there is someone from Black Resources in the meeting and they could please raise their hand to be recognized, I would appreciate that.
Let's give them a moment, since this is a default docket, to make sure that we don't have a representative from the operator in the meeting. And Mr. Schultz, when you present your case, if you could present information along the lines of the operator and whether they have engaged in this process, that would be helpful as well.
Thank you, Chair Robbins. Noted.
For the record, Ms. Larson, it's been a minute or so. Has anyone raised their hand to indicate that they are available?
They have not.
Okay, seeing no one from Black Resources, we will go ahead and allow Mr. Schultz to proceed.
Thank you, Chair Robbins. Good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Scott Schultz. I'm going to try to share my screen here. Co-counsel Lauren Mercer and I represent COGCC staff in this enforcement matter. Let's see. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks. In this hearing, I'm requesting that the commission enter an order finding violation against the operator Black Resources, Inc., operator 8725. Just a little bit of background on Black Resources, Inc. Black Resources, Inc. is the operator of record of the state 36-11 well in Montezuma County. It's roughly here in the Four Corners area, near Dolores. The well was spud back in 1989, and it has been temporarily abandoned since 1990. The well has never produced. This photo here on slide 3 shows the wellhead. This is the only oil and gas equipment that is left on location. Consistent with its TA, temporarily abandoned status, work would need to be done to bring this well back into production. This well is on U.S. Forest Service land. Black Resources, Inc. does not currently have authorization from the Forest Service to access the surface lands to operate the well. Black Resources, Inc.'s special use permit expired in 2004 and has not been renewed or reissued, and it has been therefore terminated. The mineral owner of this well is the State Land Board. As noted on the last bullet point in the slide, that Council for Enforcement Staff has conferred with the Forest Service and the State Land Board, and both are in agreement with the proposed terms of this proposed order finding violation. Slide 5. This is a photo that was taken by a COGCC inspector. Shows a tent that's pitched just outside the access gate to the well. This is a heavily used recreation area, especially in the area immediately surrounding this well. And this ties into some of the public health and safety concerns I'll discuss shortly. COGCC staff inspected the well on May 15th, 2020 to witness Black Resources, Inc.'s mechanical integrity test, and was informed that hydrogen sulfide was present at the well. Staff observed that there were no H2S monitors, warning signs, or wind indicators at the well site, and that Black Resources on-site contractor did not have gas monitors or H2S safety equipment. Black Resources did not have an H2S safety plan in place at the time of the inspection and the MIT. Black Resources later submitted a gas analysis showing 250 parts per million hydrogen sulfide present in the gas stream. This photo was taken during staff's May 15, 2020 inspection. As you can see here, the gentleman performing the MIT was not wearing any H2S safety gear or had any H2S monitor. Again, this is staff's first time that they were notified that there was an H2S issue at this site in 2000 when they conducted their inspection on May 15, 2020. On June 23rd, 2020, staff issued the NOAV to Black Resources regarding these alleged violations. On May 2021, a notice of hearing for the August 13th, 2021 hearing was issued upon Black Resources, Inc. and published pursuant to the COGCC rules. Between May and December of 2021, Counsel for Staff attempted to resolve this matter with Black Resources, Inc. That was Mr. Bill Black, and the parties were unable to reach any sort of resolution. And I will talk at the end of this just a little bit about kind of further more details on those communications. Slide 9 here is in regards to enforcement staff is requesting that the commission find Black Resources, Inc. in violation of Rule 607A, kind of for the ideas that I previously reiterated regarding the May 15th, 2020 inspection. Rule 607A requires that when well servicing operations take place in zones known to contain at or above 100 parts per million hydrogen sulfide gas, that the operator must file a hydrogen sulfide drilling operations plan with the COGCC. On May 15, 2020, Black Resources Inc. conducted an MIT without any sort of plan in place in violation of Rule 607A. On March 17, 2021, Black Resources Inc. submitted a plan to the COGCC. Enforcement staff is also requesting that the commission find Black Resources Inc. in violation of Rule 607C. Again, these are the old rules. The NOAV was issued prior to any sort of rule changes. So these are the rule changes. These are the old rules, sorry. Rule 607C requires operators to report any gas analysis indicating the presence of hydrogen sulfide gas to the commission and the local government designee. Black Resources Inc. conducted a gas analysis in 2003 that showed hydrogen sulfide concentrations of 250 parts per million at the well. Black Resources Inc. failed to report the gas analysis to the commission and the local government designee until May 21st, 2020, in violation of Rule 607C. Enforcement staff is also asking that the commission order Black Resources to plug and abandon the well pursuant to Rule 211. The commission has authority to require the plugging and abandonment of a well if, following a hearing, it determines that plugging and abandoning is reasonable and necessary to protect or minimize adverse impacts to public health, safety, welfare, the environment, or wildlife resources, or when the well is no longer used or useful. Both of these criteria are present here. This well represents a serious threat to public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources, and it is not used or useful. Again, it has been in TA status since 2000, and let me go back here, 1990, so 30 plus years. Sorry, we're not getting dizzy here. Okay, the well presents a serious threat to public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources. H2S is a highly toxic gas, exposure to which can result in severe human health impacts, including death. The National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health classifies hydrogen sulfide as immediately dangerous to life or health at concentrations of 100 parts per million. The gas stream here contains 250 parts per million of H2S, over 2.5 times what NIOSH considers a safe level. Hydrogen sulfide is corrosive and known to cause metal fatigue and embrittlement. Therefore, the risks of leaks or catastrophic failure increase as the well ages, particularly where, as here, the well is inactive and not monitored by any full-time staff. As detailed in the proposed OFE, Black Resources also has a history of non-compliance, including leaks from the well. The well is on United States Forest Service land in an area just off of a Forest Service road. It's near the Foggy Bottom area near Dolores. The road is used for recreation. This heightens the risk to public health. And going back to that picture of the tent. Additionally, this well is out of compliance with the Commission's current H2S rule, Rule 612, which requires additional mitigation measures. For example, Rule 612 requires that where an H2S well is temporarily abandoned, the operator must install a cast iron bridge in order to have a 2-tiered set of engineering controls to prevent release of H2S gas. Additionally, the well is not used or useful. During the recent financial assurance rulemaking, the Commission defined used and useful as shown on this slide. The well is not currently being used, and each of the enumerated factors indicate that the well does not have an identified future use. Again, it's been TA status since 1990. This slide depicts the application of the use and useful factors in this well, regarding this well. These factors support the conclusion that the well is not used and useful. I'm just going to go through these factors that are on the slide here. The well has never produced. The well has never generated revenue. The operator has never secured gas marketing infrastructure. It would require over likely 8 miles of permitting through U.S. Forest Service land. It would require a NEPA analysis. I won't go into the details, but it would be an enormous endeavor for them. Going to this other bubble, high costs and uncertainty of infrastructure and permitting. Touched on that a little bit. This well is simply not economically viable. Enforcement staff is requesting that the commission order the operator, Black Resources, Inc., to plug and abandon the well, reclaim the associated location, and complete final reclamation of Black Resources' other open location in the state. That location number is on this PowerPoint presentation. It does not have, is again, no actual equipment on site. Enforcement staff is also requesting the commission order the operator, Black Resources, Inc., to pay a penalty of approximately $196,000. You see the breakdown of the penalty calculation here. This penalty is based on a 1-day violation of Rule 607A for performing well servicing operations without an H2S safety plan in place, starting and ending the day that the MIT occurred on May 15th, 2020. Also, a 333-day violation of Rule 607C for failure to submit a gas analysis showing the presence of H2S to the COGCC and local government designee. Black Resources, Inc. obtained the gas analysis in 2003 and did not submit it to the COGCC or local government until May 21st, 2020. Staff proposes that this be assessed as a 333-day penalty beginning 1 year prior to the issuance of the NOAV and ending the day the analysis was submitted, both to COGCC and the local government designee. We also applied the duration matrix to this penalty. We did include an aggravating factor of 25% applied to both violations because Black Resources acted with gross negligence or knowing and willful misconduct. Black Resources knew about the presence of H2S at the well since at least 2003. Again, the 250 parts per million. Despite this knowledge, Black Resources, Inc. failed to implement H2S safety requirements, including signage and worker safety, submit a plan as required by COGCC rules, or inform the COGCC and local government designee of the presence of H2S. Enforcement staff is requesting that the commission order include requirements that if Black Resources did not comply with the corrective actions within the timelines outlined in the proposed order, or pay the penalty within 30 days after the final order is issued by the commission, that the COGCC terminate Black Resources operator number, revoke Black Resources authorization to conduct oil and gas operations in the state of Colorado, and foreclose upon Black Resources financial assurance of approximately $60,000. Lastly, enforcement staff is requesting that the commission order include provisions that allow the director to declare Black Resources well and locations orphaned, and investigate, prevent, monitor, and mitigate adverse impacts at the well formerly operated by Black Resources, Inc. At this time, I can stop sharing my screen and I can answer any questions that the commission may have, or I can also try to go into the details of the communications that we sought from Mr. Black. Just give me a minute. I'll just jump into some of the details of our communications with Mr. Black of Black Resources, Inc. Again, on June 23rd, 2020, staff issued the NOAV to Black Resources, Inc. Black Resources filed an answer to the NYB on July 23rd, 2020. That was actually with counsel. When co-counsel and I got on this enforcement matter, we reached out to Mr. Black's former counsel. He indicated that he is no longer counsel for Black Resources, Inc. On May 18, 2021, Hearing Officer Peskin issued the notice of hearing and set the matter for an August 13, 2021 hearing. On May 21st, 2021, staff mailed the notice of hearing to Black Resources, Inc. via certified mail at the address on file with the Commission pursuant to Rule 522B. On June 21st, 2021, the notice of hearing was returned to staff as unclaimed. Approximately July 2021, counsel for staff emailed Black Resources a draft proposed settlement offer and discussed this matter with Mr. Black via telephone. Again, in September and December of 2021, counsel for staff contacted Black Resources and attempted to discuss potential settlement of this matter. On February 2nd, 2022, counsel for staff filed a proposed case management order in this docket, requested an initial pre-hearing conference, and attempted to confer with Black Resources, Inc. regarding a date for the pre-hearing conference. On March 2nd and March 4th of 2022, Black Resources principal agent replied to staff's email and refused to confer regarding setting a date for the pre-hearing conference. On April 28th, 2022, staff filed a director's request to schedule an order finding violation before this commission involving essentially a defaulting operator. Lastly, staff emailed Mr. Black as recently as this Monday to ensure that he was aware of this hearing.
Did Mr. Black respond to that email?
He did not.
You mentioned that you indicated that the original counsel is no longer counsel, and he indicated that orally. Did he ever file a withdrawal of counsel with the commission?
He did not, but co-counsel and I had I can't remember if it was an email and a phone exchange, but it was definitely a written communication, and it was very clear that he no longer represented Mr. Black.
Was there ever a substitution of counsel or any other attorney enter an appearance on behalf of Mr. Black?
No, Chair Robbins.
And I would just add to what AAG Schultz said, that we also via email confirmed with Mr. Black, asked multiple times whether he was represented by counsel, and he said he was not.
Does that conclude your presentation of hearings, Officer Schultz?
It does, Chair Robbins. Thank you.
Are there questions from commissioners for the panel? All right, I'm seeing no questions. Ms. Larson, can we do one more opportunity to ensure whether Mr. Black is present or someone on behalf of Black Resources Incorporated?
Of course, I just did a search. I do not see anyone associated with Black Resources, but if in fact someone from Black Resources is in the meeting, please raise your hand and we will recognize you.
All right, let's give him a minute.
And Chair Robbins, I did have one more thing to add when
the
commission is ready. As Commissioner Gonzalez has pointed out in previous enforcement matters, in the proposed order, you'll notice that we did not seek to essentially blackball Mr. Black. Essentially, that was an oversight, and we want to, because I want to offer the commission that opportunity. The reason it did not make it into the proposed order was not intentional. It was essentially, I say, a Scrivener's error on my part. But I want to be consistent with how we've treated other operators. I think COGCC staff believes it is warranted in this case. We believe in the seriousness of this matter. So I just want to leave that for the commission.
And what would you have the commission add to the proposed order?
Just that if Mr. Black seeks to operate in the state of Colorado, that he would have to come before this commission and explain why.
Okay. All right. Ms. Larson, was there any hand raising happening?
No.
Okay. So we have the matter before us as a default motion. It's a proposed order finding violation. We've heard from staff. We've confirmed that the applicant or the operator or his counsel is not present. Do commissioners desire to deliberate, or do I have a motion? Commissioner Gonzalez.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll just make a quick comment just for the record here. It's unfortunate that Mr. Black didn't join us for this proceeding. I think there were some facts in this matter that could have been fleshed out. Maybe he might have had an opportunity to shore up some of that information himself. But you know, the lack of his presence here and participation in this matter is impactful, and I support the staff proposed request and remedies. And with that, I'll make a motion to approve the order finding violation, as well as the amendment to include Mr. Black or Black Resources with the requirement that they come before us should they choose to operate in this state again.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Thank you, Ms. Mercer. All right, we now are going to take up Abilene Perfect Energy JV LLC operator number 10581. It is also an enforcement matter. It is docket 2203-00062. Mr. Lindley.
Good afternoon, commissioners. Let me share my screen here, please. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Okay, good afternoon, commissioners. I will try and be as brief as possible with my presentation. My name is Trent Lindley. I am the NOAV specialist with the COGCC. I am not an attorney, but through this enforcement proceeding and future enforcement matters, I am expanding the capacity of my role in an effort to gain new experience and reduce the current backlog of enforcement cases. In this hearing, I am requesting the commission enter order finding violation 792 against Abilene Perfect Energy JV LLC. Abilene Perfect Energy JV LLC is the operator of record for 2 wells in Colorado, located in Lincoln County. Staff issued 3 NOAVs in 2020 for the 2 wells for missing Form 7 monthly reports of operation, a requirement of Rule 309. The NOAVs focused on missing Form 7s for the months of January, February, and March in 2020. Staff's goal in this matter is to claim the bond of a non-responsive operator that has ignored COGC staff and rules for multiple years. And I will provide evidential context to support that claim further. Excuse me. According to the State Land Board, the lease for the Surprise well was terminated on May 31st, 2018. And as of June 29th, 2022, the operator Abilene has not responded to the 3 2020 NOAVs or recent inspections conducted in 2021. The most recent production reporting for the operator Abilene's 2 wells goes back to December 2017. Here are 2 screenshots showing the most recent production reporting for the 2 wells. A notice and application for hearing for the June 24th commission hearing was sent to the operator Abilene on April 22nd and published in the Daily Journal on April 26th and the Lyman Leader on April 28th. Abilene has not responded to or participated in the enforcement process. The commission should find that operator Abilene failed to comply with the requirements of Rule 309 as laid out in the 3 NOAVs, where Abilene failed to submit their Form 7 monthly reports of operation for the 2 wells for the months of January, February, and March in 2020. For informational purposes, this slide shows the operator Abilene has a $60,000 and a $25,000 insurance bond. Staff is requesting that the commission order the operator Abilene to return to compliance with the act and rules. Staff is requesting that the commission order the operator Abilene to pay a penalty of $28,033. You can see the breakdown of the penalty calculation here. The penalty was calculated using the duration matrix described in the commission's enforcement and penalty policy and started 46 days after the end of each month. The Form 7s were due, ending today, June 29th. Staff is requesting that the commission consider the following proposed terms have been standard in the context of previous bond claim orders. Staff is requesting that the commission order, including requirements that if the operator Abilene does not pay the imposed penalty within 35 days of transmittal of this order, that the director shall revoke Abilene's authorization to conduct oil and gas operations in Colorado and foreclose Abilene's $85,000 of financial insurance. Staff is requesting that the commission consider the following proposed terms have also been standard in the context of previous bond claim orders. Staff is requesting that the commission include provisions that allow for the director to, 1, declare the operator Abilene's wells orphan wells, 2, investigate, prevent, monitor, or mitigate adverse environmental impacts at the wells, and 3, claim all equipment and saleable products at the wells formerly operated by Abilene. Unless there are any questions, staff is asking that you approve the proposed order and docket number 2203-00062. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Hearings Officer Lindley. Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Lindley. So the operator is a joint venture, right? Abilene Perfect Energy JV. And I'm curious if we know anything about the entities that form this JV, if they are still other operators in the state or what that looks like.
We do not know anything about the other partners or associations.
Further questions? Any Commissioner Messner, then Commissioner McGowan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, I mean, to follow up with Commissioner Gonzalez's question, understanding that some of these other entities ultimately could or should be responsible for this, is there a way to follow up or track these guys down to see if they can be held liable?
I think exhausting resources to get to that point might be futile, possibly. It would might create a lot of man hours and a lot of effort. But if you would like us to, we can try to pursue that avenue and see where we can get. And
I mean, I think I'm probably less interested in chasing these guys down in order to be able to develop the in order for them to pay the fine, and more interested in ensuring that they're included in this to ensure that they have their clearances revoked and the other remedies that are associated with this, if they in fact are part of this entity.
Okay, we definitely can do some due diligence on that and see where we can get and come back to the commission.
Commissioner McGowan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Lindley. I just wanted to make sure when we say that we sent something certified mail but did not hear back, did that certified mail get returned to us as if that point of contact was no longer their actual point of contact, or we just never heard back?
We just never heard back. I was
Which
looking
means
into
someone
that.
signed for it then, right?
I do not know. I was looking at the tracking information right before I went on, and according to the USPS, it is still in transit. So I don't know what that means if they continue to try. It's been since April 28th, 2022, that it's been in transit, and that happens a lot, I guess, with operators that have not, that have maybe changed their address or are not responding. Or I will say that the email that the principal agent, relative to the principal agent, was undeliverable. They they canceled that email address, supposedly.
Okay. Just given a recent issue that we had, I think we as a commission might want to contemplate, when we can't get a hold of the main contact that the operator puts in their forms, that we've shown we've done everything we can to try to connect with whomever is responsible so that this doesn't come back to us. I mean, I think that we've tried everything that we can. But it's concerning that there's not an actual person that we're aware of that has been contacted or connected with for these proceedings. I don't disagree with what we're doing and the fact that it's appropriate for us to do so. Thanks.
Gonzalez?
Yeah, so I'm scrolling through here because I was trying to look through my notes, and I don't know if I heard you say this, Mr. Lindley, but were attempts made to call any of these numbers that are listed for Mr. McGregor, Mr. Couch, Ms. Gonzalez, perhaps another Mr. McGregor. Just curious about that, or was it only sent via email and or via physical address?
Correct. Via email and the physical address. I did not make any attempts to make a phone call with anybody.
Okay, I just called one of those numbers and tried to get through to the extension. It went to a voicemail. The main line, recognizes Perfect Energy. So, not quite sure if that's a true entity, a going concern, but, to Commissioner McGowan's point, is this right for what we're trying to do in terms of shutting down an operator without, following up with the actual delivery of a notice and or a phone call?
Chair, I will add, there was an attempt that an inspector had made previously that one of the phone numbers was changed to, and I'll read the email verbatim. It was assigned to some poor woman who was receiving tons of calls for Abilene Energy, or Al McGregor, I'm sorry, who is the registered agent. And so I'm not sure why that happened, but that was back during an inspection in 2019.
Okay, well, the number I just called was a 303-500-3099 is listed here on the certificate of service. And it went to kind of a general automated with a company directory. I dialed 702 to first one that popped up, and it went to a voicemail that I did not leave a voicemail for. But it's pretty easy, it seemed like, to get through there. I don't know, it's not a bad idea to try and leave a voicemail and see if someone calls you back.
Okay, I will say, as per the rules, we did follow them in this enforcement matter, and that the company has been delinquent since 2017. They haven't responded to inspection reports. They haven't submitted any of their Form 7s. They haven't participated in this enforcement process at all. Of course, it's been through the email and the mail. We just have not had any communication with them since 2017. So I'm not sure what their status is, but maybe we can, I guess, pursue a phone call and see if that gets us anywhere, and maybe make additional attempts for the order if you would like us to do that.
Yeah, I'm not trying. I mean, if we haven't heard from them in 5 years, they're an operator that we should be hearing from them on a more regular basis, specifically with our regular forms, the monthly operation forms or whatever other annual forms that have been required are now required through mission change or financial assurance rulemakings. So, you know, I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence right now. Do we send it back and make a phone call and hear back from you in a week or so? Or do we just close it out now? And if they want to come here for, you know, come operate again in the state, they come before us. So I'm a little torn there. I'll leave that to my fellow commissioners if they want to chime in with their opinions on it.
If you wanted, commissioners, we could just continue the matter to July 13th hearing, which is our next general calendar. Allow for a phone call or two to be made, and then if there's no response, we could just take this up even as on consent, since we've already heard of it, and just hear from Mr. Lindley if anything happened. That's the preference of the commission.
I would support that, Mr. Chair.
All right, do we have a motion to continue the matter to July 13th with direction to staff to make the aforesaid phone calls?
So moved.
Second.
All right, Mr. Lindley, I think that's the direction we're going to go. I assume you don't have any real objection to that, and you can make the phone calls.
Oh yeah, definitely. Thank you for considering it, and I will try to further pursue this action and see where we can get, and I will see you back at the next hearing.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. So make the calls, plan on a brief presentation, you know, or if the operator is showing up, we'll have a lengthy preparation. If for some reason the operator does reappear, and if the operator desires some additional time to present its case, you can not have this heard on the 13th and, you know, figure it out in terms of a case management order, et cetera. But if there's no response, you can just come back and say that, and then we'll just take it up on its merits without having another full-on presentation.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, we now are turning to our last matter for the day. This involves Lasso Oil and Gas LLC, operator number 10654. It also involves 31 operating, operator number 200502. And its dockets number 2109000152 and 2008002226. I see that Ms. Rosenberg is with us. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and I will see here if I can share my screen. Can you all see?
Yes.
Okay, great. And I don't know, is Mr. Zachary Gray available? I don't know if you want him. I just, of note, he is the lawyer that represented these entities, and my understanding is he was going to be present as well, just for your information in case he has anything to offer as well. But good afternoon, Kelly Rosenberg. Oh, please.
Just for the record, I'm looking at our attendees and I do not see a Zachary Gray in attendance. Ms. Larson, is that correct?
Mr. Chair, the reason you didn't see him is because he was in transit from the attendees into the panelists. So he's now a panelist.
Oh, okay. Mr. Gray, you want to introduce yourself and provide us with, are you planning on just being here to monitor, or are you presenting part of a case?
Yes, sir. Thanks everyone for having me, and Kelly for making mention. I'm Zach Gray. I am counsel for 31 Operating and Lasso Oil and Gas. I am just here to observe. I'm not presenting any sort of case in this matter, as I believe we have entered into an OFE.
Okay, that's very good. All right, Ms. Rosenberg, please proceed.
Sure, and I'm just going to offer a short presentation just to give some background context, because this is, it's procedurally and substantively a larger case than I think the others that you've seen today, and I thought you might want a little context. So as some preliminary information, this case involves 2 operators, Lasso Oil and Gas that has 44 wells and $125,000 in bonding, and 31 operator that has 62 wells and $85,000 in bonding. Though they're 2 separate operators, they have the same designated agent, they have the same address, same email address when I used to email with Mr. Freeman directly. And so they're separate, but the reason we're consolidating them is because same ownership structure or same structure and things like that. And further, as a little background, Lasso has 3 NOAVs at issue, with the oldest one being issued in late 2019. That was docketed under its own docket number, and then one of the NOAVs was, and the 2 other NOAVs were also consolidated into that docket. Similarly, 31 Operating also has 3 NOAVs at issue, with the oldest one being issued in October 2018. These matters were consolidated in December 2021, and while they've retained their separate docket number, if you go to the e-filing system, they are both heard under docket number 2109-00152. And a little more background context. Staff, I worked directly with Lasso to try and resolve the November 2019 NOAV via an AOC. In December 2020, the parties reached an agreement in principle, but then I was unable to directly communicate with Mr. Freeman anymore. And I don't know why that was, but the negotiations essentially stalled out after we came to an agreement in principle. Staff then worked to consolidate the matters and to attempt to work with the operators to resolve them. In fall 2021, both of the operators obtained Mr. Gray as their counsel, and at that time we were able to once again re-engage in some meaningful settlement. Just a point that I'll mention just a little bit more about in a moment. In addition, one of the reasons this matter sort of took a while to progress is because 31 Operating also transferred about 100 wells to another operator. At this time, the parties have stipulated that Lasso committed 12 rule violations, and those are described in detail in the OFV. A couple of the rules the parties stipulated to were violated multiple times. And one thing I just want to note, and this is also explained in the OFV, is that as it relates to the 326B MIT violation, there's no penalty assessed for that violation. Lasso has stipulated that they committed the violation, but because of the statute of limitations ruling that the commission made in Order 1V772, no penalty was assessed for that. And the parties have stipulated that 31 Operating committed 7 separate rule violations. Again, a couple of them have more than one instance of violation. Neither Lasso nor 31 Operating have remedied all of the violations. And from staff's perspective in the field, they feel it is a lack of desire to come into compliance. I'm not opining on that. That's what staff has relayed to me. And it also seems to be a lack of resources. Some of the violations, as you can see in the OFV, are clerical in nature, and some are significant and substantive. And as of today, the penalty amount for the violations using the penalty matrix is $2,210,889. And this is just one example of one of the ongoing violations that's more substantive in nature. And this is one of Lasso's wells that had a spill that occurred in late 2020. The spill was first reported in January 2021. No supplemental Form 19 has ever been filed, and the spill remains unresolved as far as staff knows. And just to circle back a little, throughout this process, staff allowed 31 Operating to transfer about 100 wells to KT Resources. Those wells are not a part of this OFV. And in addition, Lasso was unable to make a similar transfer to either KT Resources or another operator. But the parties did work together to try and come up with a solution that would minimize the amount of wells that were handed over to the state, essentially. Staff's position is that it is unable to resolve the matters to its satisfaction, meaning staff does not feel that Lasso can bring the wells into compliance. And staff feels it is in everyone's best interest if LASSO and 31 operating simply stop operating and allow the state to manage their wells. The expectation is that all of the remaining wells will be placed on the orphan well list. And the parties have agreed really to the standard agreement that you've seen in the other orders that have come before you today, with one difference being that the staff agreed to suspend the entire penalty contingent upon Mr. Freeman agreeing to alert the commission if he ever seeks re-entry into the oil and gas industry in Colorado in a meaningful way as it relates to ownership and control from a regulatory perspective. And staff felt that was a fair trade-off, given that we were working with counsel and didn't have to go before a hearing officer, and this wasn't a contested hearing. And then similarly, the other things that staff are asking for are just the standard requests regarding what the director may do once the order is issued. And that is the conclusion of my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions from commissioners? Commissioner Gonzalez?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Ms. Rosenberg, for your presentation. So I was a little confused when I was reading this, not confused, but it's a little bit different way of, that we've seen these come before us with the party stipulating to the violation, signing on to the order finding violation. And I'm curious administratively, what's the difference between this and an AOC?
Well, we wanted this to come before the commission for you to make sort of the initial / final determination on it, instead of having the intermediary step of going to the hearing officer and then having you sign off on something that the hearing officer heard. That was sort of the rationale for going this route.
But effectively, kind of we're reaching the same point, the parties are on board with the staff's findings, with the staff's recommended remedies, et cetera.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that was my only question. Thank you.
Further questions? Commissioner Nussman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm trying to understand this a little further, because it appears to what we're agreeing to is, or I'm trying to understand what other remedies may be available here, as suspending a $2 million penalty and taking on an operator's entire portfolio of assets that clearly they are walking away from because they are unable to operate in the state of Colorado in a manner that's protective, doesn't seem like a good deal for the state of Colorado. And so I'm wondering why we're suspending this $2 million penalty, but not including that $2 million penalty in addition to the other remedies associated with this moving forward.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yeah, staff felt in this instance, because we were able to get 100 wells taken off the list and transferred from 31 operating to KT Resources, and because LASSO just couldn't find another operator to take over their other assets, staff felt this was the best way to get the parties to effectively to sign off on the agreement. And candidly, and Mr. Gray may be able to correct me here, I just don't think we would have been able to get the operators to sign off had we imposed the $2 million penalty. And it's also in line with some prior orders of this nature where it's not a default, where we have another operator or counsel on the other side working with us to negotiate it. It's the give and take that we've used in previous orders as well. So we were just sort of following precedent in that regard.
I mean, I appreciate that. I will state for the record that this does give me heartburn, because I do not think that the remedies that have been negotiated in this are adequate to be able to address the situation that we've got, and that the fact that this operator is walking away from their assets. And I appreciate that we've got in there that they are no longer able to operate in the state of Colorado. And from this commissioner's standpoint, I'm not sure how they would ever be able to explain that they could be able to operate in this state again. But there is associated penalties with this. That's clear that they were not in compliance with our rules for a whole litany of reasons. And it sure seems like a get out of jail free card here.
if I may offer this as well, there was no expectation that they would be able to pay the penalty, and for administrative efficiency and to not potentially have to get involved in a bankruptcy proceeding, those were taken into consideration as well.
Okay. No further questions.
Additional questions?
May I just jump in? This is Zach Gray.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Gray.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. So thank you, Kelly, for that presentation. And I just wanted to go on record to say that staff and its counsel presented certain facts through its perspective that, perhaps my clients don't necessarily agree with, but I just want that to be on record. Not that it has any bearing or relevance in arguing in this proceeding. We might present those facts differently.
All right, thank you for that. Does that generate any further questions? Do we have a motion? Commissioner Gonzalez?
I'll move to approve the order finding violation as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Rosenberg. Thank you for appearing before us, Mr. Gray. I believe with that, we have concluded the business that was agendized for today. I will note that we are reconvening tomorrow morning to take up docket 2205-00106, the Orphan Weld Mitigation Fee Enterprise Rulemaking. That is to convene at 9 a.m. I'm not sure if we need to adjourn to 9 a.m. tomorrow, or since that's a separate thing, if we're just going to reconvene tomorrow, or does it matter? AG Davenport.
Thank you, Chair. Given that it is a rulemaking and a separate provision, I think you can just adjourn today and then begin anew tomorrow morning.
Very good. Commissioner McGowan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just before we sign off, my own kind of observation is our contact form format is perhaps not working the way that it should, or my first observation is that operators are not keeping their information up to date and their contact information, which is not our fault, it's theirs. But that leaves us then trying to hunt and peck and make sure that when we are to the point where we're saying to somebody, we're shutting you down, we're taking over, and you may no longer operate in this state, I think we need to really show due diligence in that we did that. And so I just want staff to know this is not their fault, but this is us as a commission saying, if it ever comes back to us, we did everything in our power to try to find you. You didn't follow our rules. You did not have updated contact information. We went one step further and went down the list and tried to contact folks, and we still couldn't. You're done. It's a little frustrating to me. I feel for staff when you're not, when an operator is either non-responsive or doesn't even have updated information, or has set up things such that now we can no longer find them because it seems like they're trying not to get found, which I think is a red flag in and of itself. So someday maybe we need to have like a first contact and a second contact on our operator form. I don't know.
Well, I think that there are two entities that need to hear this information. One is staff, so they can like think about what to do, maybe create a second contact. The other set of entities that need to hear this information are unfortunately not listening yet. And so it, the problem here sort of compounds itself. But I think that, that's good direction to, Interim Director Cuthbertson to see, what, if anything, can be done to ensure that we're doing everything we can with regard to finding people or providing notice of potential hearings.
So thank you for that, Commissioner McGowan. With that, I think we need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All right, very good. Good work today. We will see everybody tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.